Chapter 391. This is the Spring Festival. Thank you again. By the way, I will adjust the update schedule tomorrow. There will still be 2 chapters a day. Please pay attention to the specific schedule. On the last day of the year, most people had returned to their hometown. Every family was full of laughter. After all, there were many customs on New Year's Eve, such as visiting their ancestors' graves and inviting them home for the Spring Festival. Therefore, the capital airport, which was usually bustling with people, was a bit cold today. But there were still many passengers who wanted to go back to their hometown to reunite with their families before the New Year's Eve dinner. The atmosphere in the airport was also very strong, but the stronger the atmosphere, the more bitter it was for them. If it was not for the sake of living, no one would want to go back home earlier. They had to rush to the last moment. Gongsun came to pick up Qin Shing and Qin Ran in person. As the housekeeper of the Qin family, he had arranged everything for the Qin family. Compared to yesterday when they came to the airport, there were basically no cars on the way back to the airport today. This huge city had once again become an empty city, but in a few days, it would once again be lively, year after year. It was unknown when this cycle would stop. In the car, Qin Ran and Uncle Gongsun were chatting about the preparations at home. Qin Shing looked at the decorations on both sides of the street and the skyscrapers through the car window. He could not help but think of the interesting things that happened when he was young. Compared to the city, the atmosphere in the countryside was stronger. But it was not as strong as it was when he was young. But Qin Shing never liked the Spring Festival when he was young, because he felt lonely every time. Every family was reuniting, but he could only stay with his grandfather in the old house. At that time, Qin Shing was a bit stubborn. Although he only had his grandfather, he insisted on cleaning the old house, pasting couplets and the word "fu," hanging the China festival, and all kinds of decorations. It must be full of the atmosphere like other people's houses. Luckily, the Lin family was there. The Lin family prepared all the New Year's goods in the old house. The Lin family asked Qin Shing and Old Master Qin to go to the Lin family for the Spring Festival many times, but Old Master Qin never agreed. It seemed that in his world, there was no such thing as the Spring Festival. Of course, Qin Shing would not go either if Old Master Qin did not go. He could only stay with his grandfather in the old house until the second day of the new year. Thinking of these past events, Qin Shing could not help but smile bitterly. The older he was, the more he knew how difficult it was for his grandfather. He had never blamed his grandfather for taking him away from the Qin family, because he had learned a lot of things from his grandfather which could not be learned in a lifetime outside. He had been thinking about how many storms an old man had to go through in his life to be able to be so calm when he was old. Nothing could cause any ripples in his heart. Day after day, year after year, it was as if he was just quietly waiting for death. Up until now, Qin Shing had never met such a legendary figure like his grandfather. However, he had yet to unveil the mysterious veil of his grandfather's life. However, now that he had returned to the Qin family, he knew that he was not far from that day. The truth of the past would gradually surface. Even if he did not take the initiative to find the answer, some things would come to him on their own. Returning to the Qin family was a new life for Qin Shing. His life would be completely turned upside down. However, everything had its pros and cons. Returning to the Qin family would also put him in a greater crisis. This was also the fundamental reason why Qin Chang'an dared not acknowledge Qin Shing at the beginning. He was afraid that Qin Shing could not bear all of this. After all, Old Master had given Qin Shing more than 20 years of happiness and comfort. He could not let him destroy it. When they arrived at the alley of the Sihiyuan, they saw that every household had pasted couplets and the word "fu" on their doors. Only the gate of the Qin family was still bare. Qin Ran asked with a smile, "Uncle Gongsun, why haven't we pasted couplets yet? Didn't we do it at this time in the past?" Gongsun explained with a smile, Master said that he would let you do it this year, so he was waiting for you to come back. Poor people are fastidious, Qin Ran said disapprovingly, but she also knew what it meant. If one really counted, this year should be the official new year in the Sihiyuan. In the past, it was too quiet. After all, Qin Sheng was back this year. After entering the Sihiyuan, Qin Sheng and Qin Ran had lunch and rested for a while. After that, they began to get busy. Gong Sun had prepared everything. However, compared with the usual days, many people left the Sihiyuan on New Year's Eve. This was Gong Sun's arrangement. Every year during the Spring Festival, they would be divided into two shifts. After the 7th day of the Lunar New Year, the bodyguards and servants who stayed in the Sihiyuan would go home to celebrate the Spring Festival. They would not come back until the 15th day of the Lunar New Year. Qin Chang'an was not there. Although he was in a high position, he was busier than anyone else during the Spring Festival. He did not come back until the afternoon of New Year's Eve. He had to visit a lot of people, but a lot of people also had to visit him. Therefore, he had to divide the time. However, this year, Qin Sheng could relax a little because Qin Sheng could do a lot of things for him. Sister, do you think it's okay? Outside the Sihiyuan, Qin Sheng stepped on the ladder and pasted the Spring Festival couplet. Qin Ran was watching him from below. 2 bodyguards were stabilizing the ladder. Gong Sun was beside him, telling him to be careful. What Qin Sheng did not expect was that this couplet was actually written by Qin Chang'an himself. After asking Gong Sun, he found out that Qin Chang'an personally wrote the couplets and the character, Fu, every year. God knew how many tycoons wanted to ask Qin Chang'an to write this couplet. Qin Sheng understood after thinking about it. No matter what, the Qin family was a family of scholars. Needless to say, his grandfather's calligraphy was at the peak. He had been trained by his grandfather since he was a child. He was thrown into the Balan Museum to copy and so on. Now, he also had some achievement, not to mention Qin Chang'an. Therefore, it was not strange. Just now, Qin Sheng carefully studied Qin Chang'an's calligraphy. Compared with the old master and him, Qin Chang'an's calligraphy was more or less mature. However, it was definitely elegant. Qin Sheng sneered at Qin Chang'an in his heart. If I had known this, I would have written it myself. It would have definitely amazed everyone. That was true. If Qin Sheng wrote it in semi-cursive script, if someone who knew about calligraphy passed by, he would definitely be shocked. It's crooked. Move it to the right, a little higher on the left. Yes, it's done. Qin Ran, who was standing below, raised her head and directed Qin Sheng. Her face was full of happiness. Within a few minutes, the two of them had pasted the couplet and the character, Fu, outside the gate. They cooperated tacitly. Qin Sheng stood at the door and said with interest, "Not bad. It's just that the calligraphy is not good enough. If it were me, it would be perfect." Qin Ran did not know whether to laugh or cry. After all, Qin Chang'an's calligraphy had been praised by several tycoons. Qin Sheng was definitely showing off his slight skill in front of an expert. "You're bragging. You're getting more and more bragging. Do you know who collected your father's calligraphy?" Qin Ran covered her mouth and smiled. She liked Qin Sheng's serious look of talking nonsense more and more. Qin Sheng said disapprovingly, "Sister, you don't believe me. You definitely haven't seen Grandpa's calligraphy, right? That's awesome. I dare not say that I can challenge Grandpa, but his calligraphy is just SOSO. When there's a chance, I'll write a piece of calligraphy for you as a gift. If you don't believe me, you can find a master to appraise it, or directly take it to Jiada or Poly Auction House. They will definitely be scared half to death by you." "Oh, where did you learn to brag? We don't have someone like you in our family." Qin Sheng's bragging became more and more exaggerated. Qin Ran did not believe him and said helplessly, "Never mind if you don't believe me. Maybe I'm too low-key. You can't wake up a person who is pretending to be asleep. You just want to pour a basin of cold water on him. So Qin Shing did not bother to argue. He shrugged and said, "Forget it if you don't believe me. Maybe I'm too low-key." Believe me. You're low-key, okay? Then don't be so long-winded. There are still a lot of things to be pasted inside. Hurry up, we still have to go to Sanli River after we finish our work. Qin Ran did not want to continue arguing with Qin Shing. She pulled him inside. "Sister, listen to me." Qin Shing wanted to continue to reason with his sister, but Qin Ran had already ignored him. Qin Shing could only sigh, "It's lonely to be a master." Qin Shing and Qin Ran pasted couplets and the word "fu" on all the doors and windows of the Sihiyuan. They also hung a lot of china knot. Together with the lanterns, the entire Sihiyuan was extraordinarily beautiful. It was already 4 o'clock when they finished the work. Qin Ran took Qin Shing to the old house in Sanli River. Fortunately, it was not far away. They arrived in less than 20 minutes. The old house had been cleaned by the ant. Qin Shing and Qin Ran pasted the couplets and hung the lanterns in a hurry. It took them half an hour to finish the work. Last but not least, it was to hold a memorial ceremony for their mother. They put up the offerings brought from the Sihiyuan. Qin Ran, as his sister, offered incense. After kneeling down and kowtowing, Qin Ran faced their mother's portrait and said happily, "Mom, it's the spring festival." Qin Shing followed his sister and said, "Mom, it's the spring festival." It had been more than 20 years. The whole family could finally reunite for the spring festival. It was already 5:30 p.m. when they returned from the old house to the Sihiyuan. The atmosphere of the spring festival was getting stronger and stronger. The radio was talking about the local customs of the spring festival. Qin Shing looked at his sister, who was driving seriously, and felt inexplicably happy. When they came back, Qin Chang'an was already there. He was busy in the living room. Qin Ran teased him on purpose. "Dad, I thought you were not coming back. You were going to take your brother to Shanghai to live with Grandma." Qin Chang'an did not know whether to laugh or cry. He knew that his daughter was teasing him again. He had no choice but to reply, "How could I bear to leave you?" The tea table in the living room was filled with all kinds of melon seeds, fruits, candies, and snacks. There was no empty space on the table. Qin Ran was confused. "Dad, why did you put so many things on the table?" Qin Chang'an did not answer. Of course, he would not tell her the reason. He just pushed Qin Ran and said, "Don't make trouble here. You and your brother bought new clothes, right? Go take a shower and change. The New Year's Eve dinner is almost ready." Qin Ran curled her lips and said, "How old are you? You still need to wear new clothes." However, she seemed to have forgotten that Qin Shing had said the same thing some time ago. She did not care about Qin Shing at all, and took him to buy a lot of things. However, although she said that, she still pulled Qin Shing upstairs. This spring festival was destined to be different from the past. After all, for so many years, no spring festival could make her so happy. After taking a shower and changing into new clothes, Qin Ran saw Qin Shing, who looked like a new person. She could not help but say, "Tisk tisk, you are indeed my brother. You are so handsome. I am almost fascinated by you." Qin Shing also looked at his sister in front of him up and down. Her temperament and appearance were really much better than those big stars. He smiled and said, "Well, with such a beautiful sister, of course, I will have such a handsome brother. Otherwise, I will embarrass her." Qin Ran was amused by Qin Shing, and could not stop laughing. She took Qin Shing's arm and went downstairs. They were really a golden couple. As expected, when they went downstairs, Qin Chang'an, who had just taken a few bottles of red wine from the wine cellar, was directly stunned. He almost said, "You are indeed my son and daughter." Qin Ran walked to Qin Chang'an, took her father's arm and asked, "Dad, why is the New Year's Eve dinner so sumptuous this year?" Qin Chang'an smiled faintly and gave the answer. "The guests should be here. You go and welcome them for me." "There are guests this year?" Who? Qin Ran could not help but ask curiously. In the past, there had never been guests on New Year's Eve. Qin Chang'an deliberately kept her in suspense. You will know when you go out. When Qin Ran took Qin Shing out of the Sihiyuan, they waited at the gate for less than 2 minutes. 2 cars stopped at the gate of the Sihiyuan. When they were wondering who it was, they saw their uncle and aunt getting out of the car slowly, followed by their 2 cousins, their cousin-in-law, and their children. Qin Ran was shocked by this surprise. She was so excited that she did not know what to say. It did not occur to her that her uncle's family would come to the Sihiyuan for the spring festival. It was really unexpected. The Sihiyuan in the past was really crowded this year. Qin Ran only wanted to say, "This is the real spring festival." Chapter 392. He was a little panicked. That incident had caused a great disturbance. Not to mention how the Qin family had been besieged. What role had the Zhu family played in the disturbance? Anyway, the unexpected death of Qin Shing's mother and old Master Qin's taking Qin Shing away had made the Zhu family dislike the Qin family. The relationship between the 2 families had deteriorated. Although the Zhu family didn't keep in touch with the Qin family all these years, the elders had little contact with each other. The only special thing was that the Zhu family didn't have a problem with Qin Ran, their niece. They loved her dearly. She was innocent but also the most pitiful one. After so many years, relying on his own ability and the resources that the Qin family had accumulated over the years, Qin Chang'an finally made a name for himself in Siju City. However, even so, the Zhu family was still lukewarm to Qin Chang'an. The Empress Dowager had never seen Qin Chang'an. She only saw her precious granddaughter, but she had helped Qin Chang'an a few times. Now, the relationship between the Qin family and the Zhu family had finally changed, which was Qin Shing's return. That was why Zhu Weiguo had brought his family to the Sihiyuan for the spring festival. Ran, what's wrong? You don't welcome us? Wu Yajun walked up to Qin Ran slowly and said with a smile. Although she was old, she had maintained herself well. Zhu Weiguo walked up to Qin Shing, patted him on the shoulder and said, "Good boy. You look more energetic than a few days ago." Qin Shing was surprised. He didn't expect that his uncle and aunt would come to the Qin family's Sihiyuan for the spring festival. But he wasn't as shocked as Qin Ran, who knew that the 2 families hadn't been close these years. Uncle, aunt. Qin Shing greeted them politely. Qin Ran came back to her senses and threw herself into Wu Yajun's arms excitedly. "Aunt, why are you here? I didn't expect that. Why didn't you tell me so that I could be mentally prepared?" Wu Yajun laughed. "You don't need to be mentally prepared. We told your father." "What's wrong? He didn't tell you?" Qin Ran said grumpily, "He didn't tell us. He deliberately kept us guessing. I was wondering why the old man was acting so weird today." The living room was filled with food, and the New Year's Eve dinner was much more sumptuous than in previous years. "It turns out that you are coming. The treatment is really different." Wu Yajun held Qin Ran's hand and said, "Child, how can you talk about your father like that? Your father probably wants to give you a surprise." Qin Ran said sincerely, Okay, it's a surprise. But I'm really happy. Our family has never been so lively." At this time, Qin Ran saw her cousins, cousin-in-law, and a few little guys behind them. She quickly let go of her aunt, pulled Qin Shing to them, and introduced them. "Qin Shing, let me introduce them to you. This is eldest cousin and eldest sister-in-law. This is second cousin and second sister-in-law. These 2 are eldest cousin's son and daughter. Their names are Fei and Now. This is second cousin's son, Zhu. Auntie Ran, I don't like the name Now. My name is Zhu Xiuan." Qin Ran's eldest cousin's daughter was the youngest. She was mischievous and cute. Qin Ran picked her up and said, Okay. Your name is Zhu Xiuan." Although it was the first time for Qin Shing to meet them, he was already used to this kind of rhythm. After all, they were all his relatives, so he did not have stage fright and greeted them politely. Qin Ran's eldest cousin was Zhu Qingyuan, and her second cousin was Zhu Fengyuan. The eldest cousin was a few years older than Qin Ran, and the second cousin was about the same age as her. The two cousins were very familiar with Qin Sheng when they were young. Qin Sheng always followed them. However, fate made fools of people. It was more than 20 years later when they met again. It's been more than 20 years. The changes are really too big. I really can't recognize you. Zhu Qingyuan, who was pursuing an official career, sighed with emotion. He had a deep memory of Qin Sheng. After all, when Qin Sheng left, he was already in junior high school. Qin Sheng did not know what to say. Now Zhu Fengyuan, who was already a little famous in the military, smiled bitterly and said, "Yeah, I can't recognize you either. At that time, you were a cute little guy. Now you are a handsome young man." The two cousin sisters-in-law did not have much contact with Qin Sheng. They just greeted him politely. However, they had heard from their husbands that they had a cousin who had been separated from them for many years. It did not occur to them that 2 days ago, their husbands would say that this cousin had come back. It did not occur to them that they would celebrate the Spring Festival in the Sihiyuan of the Qin family this year. Zhu Weigua helped Qin Sheng out. "Alright, it's so cold outside. Don't let the kids catch a cold. Go in and catch up." Qin Sheng finally breathed a sigh of relief. Qin Ran walked to Qin Sheng and said, "I'll get used to it gradually. My cousins always miss you. They were very nice to you when you were young. Second cousin even fought with you several times." At this time, Qin Chang'an came out to greet them at the gate of the Sihiyuan, followed by the old butler, Gongsun. After all, Zhu Weigua's rank was not low. Qin Chang'an dared to put on airs in front of others, but he did not dare to do so in front of Zhu Weigua, his brother-in-law, or the Empress Dowager. However, the Empress Dowager was destined not to come to the Sihiyuan. "Brother, sister-in-law, we've been waiting for you," Qin Chang'an said with a smile. Qin Chang'an, who had dominated Siju City for many years, did not dare to show any arrogance in front of Zhu Weigua, a big shot. He could not forget Zhu Weigua's rage when his wife passed away and his son ran away. If it were not for someone protecting him, Zhu Weigua would have beaten him up. Zhu Weigua and Qin Chang'an did not see each other often. They might only see each other a few times a year. They did not even call each other on normal days. This time, their whole family went to the Qin family's Sihiyuan to celebrate the Spring Festival, not only to ease the relationship between the Zhu and Qin families, but also for Qin Ran and Qin Sheng, not for Qin Chang'an. Zhu Weigua patted Zhu Weigua's arm and said, "Let's go in and talk. I haven't had a drink with you for many years. You should drink with me more today." Qin Chang'an knew that this Confucian general could hold his liquor well, so he said, "I dare not say that I won't go home until I'm drunk, but I'm sure I can keep you company." Zhu Weigua and Qin Chang'an, the two big shots, walked in the front. Qin Sheng and his aunt followed behind, chatting and laughing with his aunt. Qin Ran held Now in her arms and chatted with her two cousin-in-laws. This big family was very lively. Except for Zhu Weigua and Wu Yajun, the others were familiar with the Qin family's Sihiyuan. They would come here several times a year. At this moment it was already dark. The air was filled with the smell of the Spring Festival. The big red lanterns in the Sihiyuan had been lit. Together with the decorations, it was extraordinarily beautiful. Several children were chattering and pointing here and there happily. Anyway, they liked to come here the most, because this son-in-law's red packet was the biggest. The New Year's Eve dinner had been prepared long ago. At this moment, everyone was hungry, so they went to the dining room directly. When they saw the sumptuous New Year's Eve dinner on the table, they all had a good appetite. After all, Qin Chang'an had invited the executive chef of the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, which was the nearest to them, to cook. The main guest sat down. Naturally, Zhu Weigua sat in the main seat. Qin Chang'an and Wu Yajun sat on both sides with their families. Gongsun brought the prepared liquor over. Today, he brought 3 servants with him to serve them personally. Of course, the men drank liquor, while the women drank soft drinks and red wine. Both of Qin Shing's cousin-in-laws drank soft drinks, because they needed to drive home at night. After drinking a few glasses of liquor, the New Year's Eve dinner became lively. Like every other family, everyone ate, chatted, and drank. The TV in the dining room was broadcasting the familiar year after year, and everyone was recalling the little things that happened in this year. This year, the biggest event of the Zhu family and the Qin family should be Qin Shing's return. During this New Year's Eve dinner, Qin Shing drank a lot. Anyway, the father and the son would accompany his uncle and cousins to enjoy themselves to the fullest. Fortunately, Qin Shing was a good drinker. Whether it was playing drinking games or toasting, he was not afraid. However, his 2 cousins were a bit tired. After the New Year's Eve dinner, everyone moved to the living room. The children played in the yard. Gongsun had bought a lot of toys in advance, and he would let them enjoy themselves to the fullest tonight. The adults were chatting and playing cards in the living room. At this time, the Spring Festival Gala also began. Although it was not as popular as before, it was still an indispensable dish for people all over the country on New Year's Eve. Zhu Qingyuan, who came back from Jiangsu, brought the most popular game there, which was called beating the eggs. The game was not complicated, but it was not simple either. There were 4 people playing against each other. However, for these extremely smart people, they understood the rules as soon as they were told. Of course, Qin Shing would play with Qin Chang'an, while Zhu Weiguo and Zhu Qingyuan would play against each other. The 2 pairs of father and son would play against each other to see who would come out on top. The women, on the other hand, gave advice and suggestions at the back. At the same time, they would stand in when the men answered the phone. After all, these men were busier than anyone else during the New Year's Eve. Except for Qin Shing, the others' phone calls almost never stopped. Therefore, the game could only be carried on intermittently. When it was just past 11 o'clock, the game was over. At this time, everyone started to pay New Year's greetings to the elders. Except for a few children, the others were all holding their phones. Of course, for example, Zhu Weiguo and Qin Chang'an, they still had to pay New Year's greetings to the especially important people. Qin Shing did not pay attention to them. He took his phone and went upstairs alone. First, he sent a video call to Xin and Auntie Wang to pay New Year's greetings. After chatting with them for a while, he hung up. Seeing that they were at home alone, Qin Shing felt somewhat sad. Then, he called Hao Lei. As soon as the phone rang, it was answered. Hao Lei could not wait to ask Qin Shing about his life in Beijing. Qin Shing told him honestly that this was the busiest spring festival he had ever experienced. Hao Lei also felt gratified. After the conversation, Qin Shing called Lao Chang to pay New Year's greetings. As expected, Lao Chang's phone was still turned off. Qin Shing did not know whether to laugh or cry. He did not know where Lao Chang had gone. However, he was used to his elusiveness. Nevertheless, he was sure that nothing bad had happened to him. In the end, Qin Shing stood by the window with his phone in his hand, looking at the children who were playing in the yard thoughtfully. Qin Shing was somewhat restless and hesitant. Finally, he dialed Lin Su's phone. He made Lin Su wait for so long and only contacted her after such a long time. Qin Shing felt somewhat guilty. After all, she was his real girlfriend. Moreover, the relationship between him and the Lin family was so complicated. Lin Su, who was caught in the middle, was even more uncomfortable. He did not know how she had been during this period. Qin Shing was thinking about how to ask Lin Su, what to say and what to ask. However, at this time, a familiar voice came through the phone. The number you have dialed has been turned off. Chapter 393. The most important thing, the next update time will be at this time. Excluding Song Jiqiu, Lin Su was the only girlfriend Qin Sheng had officially acknowledged, except for Su Qin, his first love. In the past 2 years, Lin Su, the beautiful and fair daughter of a rich family, had accompanied Qin Sheng through many hardships and grievances. Otherwise, Yan Chaozong would not have been so crazy about her. She gave up everything, fell out with her family, and lived the most ordinary life with Qin Sheng. Which excellent and arrogant woman could do this? Especially during the half a year when Qin Sheng was recovering from his injury, he did not know what would have happened to him. Therefore, no one would doubt Qin Sheng's love for Lin Su. It was not that he did not want to contact Lin Su. Firstly, he was in a complicated mood these days. He did not have time to find Lin Su in a short time, and he did not know how to explain to her what had happened during this period. Secondly, he could imagine Lin Su's life after she returned to the Lin family. If he did not show up, it might be better. If the Lin family knew that he was still pestering Lin Su, it would only make Lin Su's situation in the Lin family more difficult. The only thing he had to do was to go to the Lin family above board, slap the Lin family in the face, and take Lin Su away. Otherwise, everything else would be meaningless to Lin Su. Now, Qin Sheng had planned to go to Ningbo after the Spring Festival. Therefore, he contacted Lin Su to let her be a little prepared. However, he did not expect that Lin Su's phone was also turned off. Qin Sheng was a little panicked. He was not worried that Lin Su would change her mind. It was not because he was confident, but because he trusted Lin Su very much. Lin Su had been with him through so many ups and downs. If she was really disappointed in him, she would not have stood behind him and supported him unconditionally. He was just worried about Lin Su's situation in the Lin family. If she silently bore all kinds of pressure, it would make Qin Sheng very uncomfortable. Now Qin Sheng could only pray that the Lin family would not do anything excessive. Otherwise, they would not blame him for turning against them. After thinking about it, Qin Sheng was still worried. He called Lin Su again, but her phone was still turned off. Qin Sheng had to sigh and send a short message. "Wife, Happy New Year. I am fine. I will pick you up after the Spring Festival." As for whether Lin Su could see it or not, he did not care. In a few minutes, it would be the New Year. Qin Ran found that Qin Sheng was not around after making the call. She could not help but feel a little worried, so she went upstairs to look for Qin Sheng. Qin Sheng had just come out of his room. "It's the Spring Festival, why don't you look happy?" Qin Ran asked worriedly. Anyone could tell that Qin Sheng had a lot on his mind. Qin Sheng didn't know what to say. He sighed and said, "Sister, Lin Su's cell phone is turned off. I can't get in touch with her. I'm afraid that she might be wronged in the Lin family." Qin Sheng did not hide anything from his sister. He was really worried about Lin Su and was already thinking of killing his way to the Lin family. Qin Ran did not take it seriously. On the contrary, she teased casually, "Oh, now you know how to love your wife. Then I will be jealous in the future." Qin Sheng didn't understand. "I'm burning with anxiety and you're still joking with me? Alright, it's the New Year, I won't tease you anymore. Don't worry about Lin Su. How can the Qin family not care about our future daughter-in-law? Uncle Gongsun has already made arrangements. Lin Su is fine, but the Lin family has chosen a new marriage partner. Lin Su has been under a lot of pressure recently. If it weren't for the old lady's protection, she would have been wronged," Qin Ran explained honestly. The Qin family never made any mistakes. After all, Lin Su was Qin Sheng's girlfriend. A fair, rich, and beautiful girl who was excellent in all aspects chose a poor loser with no family background. Not everyone had this kind of courage. Of course, the Qin family would not wrong Lin Su. Moreover, Qin Sheng had no time to be distracted. Naturally, there would be people to worry about these things. Qin Sheng did not expect that the Qin family had already made arrangements. He said in surprise, "Sister, really? Did Nangong go there?" As for the pressure the Lin family put on Lin Su, It was within Qin Sheng's expectation. He silently remembered it in his heart. He would make the Lin family pay the price later. No, Uncle Gong's son arranged for someone else, Qin Ran explained with a smile. Qin Sheng said in surprise, then why didn't Nangong come back for the new year? She went to Palau for vacation. She is enjoying herself these 2 days. She will come back to Beijing on the 5th day of the new year, Qin Ran said with a smile. Well, it's almost 12 o'clock. Everyone is waiting for you. Let's hurry down. We were video chatting with Grandma just now. My sister-in-law almost spilled the beans. Luckily we covered it up. You are the New Year gift we prepared for Grandma. Hearing this, Qin Sheng felt very warm. Thinking of his grandmother who had been waiting for him and who loved him the most, Qin Sheng was looking forward to it. When Qin Sheng returned to the living room, everyone asked him all at once. Someone teased him about whether he was chatting with his girlfriend on the phone. Qin Sheng did not explain and just brushed it off casually. 10, 9, 8, 7, 3, 2, 1. When the New Year bell rang, the young people cheered happily and wished each other a happy New Year. If it was in the past, they would not be so happy. But this year, it was rare for two families to celebrate the New Year's Eve together. The atmosphere was especially lively. The children were even more excited because they could get their New Year's money. The elders were very calm. After all, they were people who had one foot in the grave. After so many years, they were not used to this. Moreover, they were people who had been through a lot. At this time, the children began to kowtow to their grandparents and other elders. Gong's son had already wrapped the red packets according to the practice in the past. He had already given them to Qin Chang'an, Qin Sheng and Qin Ran in advance. The red packets were only a few thousand yuan. After all, it was just a tradition. The two older children were more sensible. They had prepared a lot of New Year's greetings. The youngest, Now, was the most interesting. After receiving the red packets, she was afraid that her parents would ask for it, so she turned around and ran to the yard. Qin Sheng and Qin Ran also received the red packets from their uncle and aunt. Qin Ran was a little embarrassed because she could receive red packets from her uncle, aunt, grandmother, and small aunt every year. At first, Qin Ran refused, saying that she was already so old and did not need to receive red packet. The elders said that as long as she was not married, she would always be a child. Since they were urging her to get married in a disguised way, of course, Qin Ran received the red packet. Anyway, it was money. The new year began. The Zhu family spent an unforgettable New Year's Eve in the Sihiyuan of the Qin family. At this time, it was time for them to go back. After all, they would be busy tomorrow and could not stay in the Qin family, even if the guest room of the Qin family could accommodate so many people. Qin Chang'an led Qin Ran and Qin Sheng to see the Zhu family out. They chatted for a while at the door and reminded them again. After watching them get in the car and leave, he walked back to the Sihiyuan. On the way back, Qin Ran deliberately teased, "Dad, how did you trick my uncle to come here? Did you get along well with him?" Qin Chang'an did not dare to fool this general, for he might go for wool and come home shorn. He told the truth. "I didn't fool him. It was your uncle who took the initiative to call me. I was also surprised at that time. However, everyone could see that your uncle didn't want to get along well with me. He did it for you and your brother." It was not until then that Qin Ran understood. She said thoughtfully, "Oh, I understand. Uncle is really considerate." Of course, Qin Sheng did not understand the complicated reasons. But he would understand later. He was the key to change the relationship between the Zhu family and the Qin family. When he went back to the living room, Gong's son was arranging the servants to clean up the mess. After all, the real work would start tomorrow. Every year, the official end would be after the 15th day of the first lunar month. The Sihiyuan of the Qin family was crowded with people and carriages. Not everyone could enter this Sihiyuan. "Uncle Gong's son, Happy New Year. Thank you for your hard work." Qin Ran walked to Gongsun and said with a sweet smile. She had never regarded Uncle Gongsun as an outsider. After all, even the old man did not treat Uncle Gongsun as an outsider. He had always treated Uncle Gongsun as his biological brother. In these years, Uncle Gongsun had done his best for the Qin family. Qin Xing had been back for a long time. Of course, he knew Gongsun's position in the Qin family. He smiled and said, "Happy New Year, Uncle Gongsun." Gongsun took out the prepared red packet from his pocket and said, "It's my job. It's not hard at all. Here's a red packet for you. Don't blame me for being stingy." "Thank you, Uncle Gongsun." Qin Ran took it without hesitation. She had received red packets from Uncle Gongsun every year for so many years. She had never refused them, because they were his kind intentions. Qin Xing felt a little embarrassed. Gongsun directly put the red packet in Qin Xing's hand. Just now, it was not suitable for him to show up in front of the Zhu family. So he could only give the two children red packets now. Qin Xing looked at his sister. Apparently, Qin Ran wanted him to take it. Qin Xing had no choice but to take it. He smiled and said, "Thank you, Uncle Gongsun." At this time, Qin Chang'an saw that it was getting late. He said to them, "Go to bed early. You have a task tomorrow morning." Qin Ran knew what he meant. Qin Xing was a little curious, but he did not ask more. The sister and brother chatted with the servants for a while, and then went upstairs to rest. Lying on the bed, Qin Xing could not calm down. He thought about many things. This spring festival was destined to be unforgettable for him. It had never been so lively, especially during the spring festival last year. Poor him, he was still lying in bed. Fortunately, Lin Su was there to accompany him, so he did not feel so lonely. Thinking about Lin Su, Qin Xing did not know whether Lin Su was also thinking about him at this time. After being separated from Lin Su for so long, Qin Xing missed her more and more. He could not help but want time to pass faster, so that he could go to the Lin family earlier to pick her up. Thinking about it, Qin Xing fell asleep. On the first day of the first lunar month, when Qin Xing woke up, everyone was already waiting for him in the living room. The kitchen made dumplings overnight. It was a tradition of people in the north to eat dumplings during the spring festival. However, the Qin family ate dumplings on the first day of the first lunar month. After eating the dumplings, Qin Chang'an asked Gongsun to take out the things that had been prepared. He said to Qin Ran, Ran, these are prepared for the Song family. I won't go this year. Take Qin Xing to pay a New Year visit to your grandpa Song." Qin Ran thought about it. Of course, she knew what this meant. Every year, the New Year visit would start from the Song family. However, in the past, it was the old man who paid the New Year visit in person. This year, she would take Qin Xing there. Not to mention that the Qin family and the Song family were friends for generations, and the Song family lived in an alley a few streets away. Not to mention that without the Song family, the old man would not be in such a position. The most important thing today was the big event between the Qin family and the Song family. Qin Ran did not know how to comment on it. She just followed the old man's instructions and did what she should do. As for the other things, it was Qin Xing's choice. Qin Xing did not refuse Qin Chang'an's arrangement. Since he had accepted this identity, he knew that as Qin Chang'an's only son, he would inherit everything of the Qin family in the future, including these resources. Today was just the beginning. Chapter 394. Grandpa Song, I don't understand. I said in advance that I would adjust the update time. What do you mean by I will work hard during the voting period and stop updating after voting? Look, from the 5th of this month, I will update twice a day and I will update regularly. At Qin Chang'an's level, he was most afraid of festivals. After all, there were not many people who could ask him to pay New Year's greetings, but there were many people who wanted to pay New Year's greetings to him. It was a headache to know how to do it properly. However, the New Year's holiday was only a few days. No matter how Qin Chang'an arranged it, he would not be able to do anything. Therefore, in the past years, he would go out early in the morning to pay New Year's greetings and come back at noon to welcome the guests. He was so confident because he was in this position. When he was young, Qin Chang'an would be exhausted after a spring festival. This year, Qin Sheng was back. Qin Chang'an could finally be a little lazy. As his son, Qin Sheng could totally represent him. Moreover, this was also his intention to tell everyone that his son, Qin Chang'an, was back and would officially take over from today onwards. He wanted to know how his opponents, who had always made fun of him for not having a son, would look after knowing this. He was afraid that they would be so angry that their teeth would itch. In life, the most important thing was to fight for one's dignity. It was estimated that Qin Chang'an would be even more arrogant when he met his opponents. Qin Sheng calmly accepted Qin Chang'an's arrangement. Whether it was to pay New Year's greetings on behalf of Qin Chang'an, to sit with the guests at noon, or to officially enter the company after the New Year, Qin Sheng had no objection, because these were all things that would happen sooner or later. Refuse? Qin Sheng would not. He would not be so fragile, because this was what he deserved. It was just that he was late for more than 20 years. Moreover, at least he knew that this was the only way he could successfully avenge Qingyang. Qin Ran took Qin Sheng out with the gift. Gong Sun arranged a slightly low-key outie for them. There were rules about which house to pay New Year's greetings, what gifts to take and what car to drive. Gong Sun had been in charge of the Qin family's affairs for so many years, of course. He had already remembered these rules and never made any mistakes. Qin Ran was no stranger to the Song family. Although she did not have much contact with the younger generation of the Song family, she would accompany her father to visit Grandpa Song every year. In the past, one of the elders of the Song family had intended to matchmake her with the extremely outstanding younger generation of the Song family. The two of them had also met, but Qin Ran eventually kept her distance. Putting aside the fact that she had vowed not to get married until she found her younger brother, the most important thing was that she did not appreciate the man who many people had high hopes for. Many people were disappointed that she did not marry that man from the Song family. They wondered if Qin Sheng would have a relationship with that woman who was not inferior to her cousin. Although the two families had a seemingly childish engagement in the past, Old Master Song was more supportive of it. Qin Chang'an did not dare to have too much say in this matter. After all, this was decided by the two old masters back then. It was not up to him to interfere. Therefore, knowing that Qin Sheng had a girlfriend, Qin Chang'an could only do this. As for Qin Sheng's feelings, Qin Chang'an did not want to interfere too much. Because based on his understanding of Qin Sheng, this would definitely make Qin Sheng extremely disgusted and strongly resist, which would make their already fragile relationship even worse. After all, Qin Sheng and Lin Su had a very deep relationship, and they had gone through a lot of ups and downs. It was obviously impossible for Qin Sheng to give up Lin Su and choose that girl from the Song family. Qin Sheng could not do it. However, Qin Chang'an was also in a difficult position. He could not offend Old Master Song. After all, this matter had always been on Old Master Song's mind. He had been thinking about it for so many years. Therefore, Qin Chang'an could only bite the bullet and do it. However, after all, when it came to love, both sides had to agree. After all, a melon that was forcefully twisted would not be sweet. If that girl from the Song family did not like Qin Sheng, then Qin Chang'an would have room to negotiate with Old Master Song. Why did Qin Chang'an think so? Because that girl from the Song family was really too outstanding, and she was very arrogant. Based on the current Qin Sheng, he was not worthy of her at all. It was not that he underestimated Qin Sheng, but he knew himself. In the beginning, Qin Ran did not understand why Qin Chang'an did this. Because she knew that Qin Chang'an was very satisfied with Lin Su. Moreover, everything that Lin Su did for Qin Shing made the Qin family could not find any fault at all. Although Qin Shing was not worthy of Lin Su in the past, and Lin Su was not worthy of Qin Shing now, Lin Su could still make such a decision at that time. Did Qin Shing want Qin Shimi to give up Lin Su and break her heart now that he had become so powerful? This was not the way to be a person. However, it was not until Qin Chang'an finished telling her the ins and outs of the whole thing that Qin Ran understood the old man's helplessness. This was indeed a dilemma. At present, they could only do this. No one dared to offend old Master Song. After all, his status was too high. At present, the only hope was that the girl from the Song family did not like Qin Shing. It only took 10 minutes to drive from the Qin family's Sihiyuan to the Song family. Qin Ran was familiar with the road, while Qin Shing, who was in the passenger seat, was absent-minded. For him, this was just a task. He just needed to go through the motions and complete it smoothly. The Song family and the Qin family are old friends. I heard from the old man that Grandpa was kind to Grandpa Song and helped him in the two most important periods of his life. So these years, the Song family has been taking good care of our family, Qin Ran casually introduced to Qin Shing. She now liked to call Qin Chang'an old man because the old man was really old. Qin Shing just nodded and said, "Oh," indicating that he understood. Some things were just the beginning for him now. These were the resources accumulated by the Qin family for several generations. As for how much he could inherit in the end, it would depend on his ability. It did not mean that he could take over everything because of his identity or Qin Chang'an's deliberate action. Thinking about it, Qin Chang'an was like this in the past. How to make these people approve of him was not something that could be done in a day or two. The Song family was located in an alley behind Jingshan. The Sihiyuan in this alley was similar to the one where the Qin family was located, where rich and powerful big shots live. However, compared with the two-story Sihiyuan that the Qin family had renovated, the Song family's Sihiyuan was more low-key. It was similar to an ordinary Sihiyuan, but it looked more mysterious. Although it was only early in the morning, there were many people on the road. After all, today was the first day of the Lunar New Year, and everyone was walking on the streets to pay New Year's greetings. The alley where the Song family was located was not narrow. There were only 2 cars parked at the entrance. Qin Ran parked the car casually on the side of the road, and then led Qin Shing out of the car with the gift. Qin Ran pointed to the gray iron gate and said, "This is it. We'll leave in half an hour." She went forward and rang the doorbell. Not long after, a middle-aged man came out to open the door. There was a surveillance camera at the door, so the identity of the people inside had already been confirmed. Otherwise, they would not have opened the door so casually. "Uncle He, Happy New Year." Qin Ran smiled after seeing the middle-aged man who opened the door. The man, who was called Uncle He by Qin Ran, squinted his eyes and smiled. "Old Master is already waiting for you inside." The middle-aged man nodded at Qin Shing again. He did not ask more about Qin Shing's identity. He just took the gift from Qin Shing's hand. If it were someone else, the middle-aged man might have changed his face. However, no one dared to ask for a snub without being invited. The middle-aged man seemed to be very polite, but he did not say much. After all, he was familiar with Qin Chang'an, and did not have much interaction with Qin Ran, who was a junior. Qin Ran said to Qin Shing in a low voice, "This is Grandpa Song's secretary after he retired. He has been working for Grandpa Song for many years. Sometimes, whether he can see Grandpa Song or not, he just needs to say a word." The gatekeeper of the Prime Minister was a level 7 official. Qin Shing understood this. Since he could serve the old master for so many years, he was obviously deeply trusted. This was similar to Uncle Gongsuan's position in the Qin family. However, the only thing that shocked Qin Shing was that there were guards on duty after entering the door. Who was this old master? The layout of Song Jia's Sihiyuan was similar to that of the Qin family. It seemed that most Sahyuan were like this. After entering the door, there was the front yard, where 3 cars were parked. After passing through the corridor, they walked into the main yard. There were east and west wing rooms on both sides. The main room facing south was located in the north. The yard was full of flowers and plants, and it was clean. At this moment, in the living room of the main room, old Master Song, who was wearing a Chinese tunic suit, was sitting in the main seat. Below him sat 3 men with different auras. 2 of them were about the same age as Uncle He, who was in his 50s or 60s. The last one was slightly younger, looking like he was in his early 30s. He's here. Old Master Song, who was already in his 90s, had good eyesight and ears. He was also very energetic, which was rare. The others also heard the noise outside and could not help but cheer up. They came so early today because they had an important task. When Uncle He pushed open the door of the living room, the others subconsciously looked in his direction. The middle-aged man smiled and said, "Old Master, Ran Ran is here." Qin Ran and Qin Xing followed him in. Qin Ran smiled and looked relaxed. After all, she was familiar with the people of the Song family. However, when she saw the young man sitting there, she was somewhat surprised. It did not occur to her that he would also be here, which made her feel awkward. Qin Ran had been born in such a family since she was a child. She had seen many seniors and tycoons in high positions. She was also very familiar with them, so she did not feel pressured at all. However, Qin Xing was somewhat nervous. After all, this was the first time for him to experience such a big scene. He had never seen such a family before. Since Qin Chang'an paid so much attention to it, it was obviously not an ordinary family. Consequently, Qin Xing kept taking deep breaths before entering the door to adjust his mentality, so that he could face these things calmly. However, even so, when he walked into the living room, he still felt more pressured. That was because he instantly felt that everyone's attention was focused on him, which made him very surprised. However, he immediately understood that the people of the Song family had obviously known his identity. However, what happened next shocked Qin Xing so much that he almost lost his composure. When he subconsciously raised his head and looked at Grandpa Song, who was sitting in the main seat, which the Qin family paid special attention to, he instantly recognized who this old man was. He was so shocked that he broke out in a cold sweat and was subconsciously stunned. Maybe many young people did not know who he was, but Qin Xing, who had a wide range of knowledge, was very clear about this Grandpa Song's identity. However, he had only seen this old man on TV or in the news. It did not occur to him that he would be able to see the old master in person today. Chapter 395. Who was she? How powerful was the Qin family? At present, Qin Xing was not sure. He had never asked his sister Qin Ran, Qin Chang'an, or Uncle Gongsun. He only guessed from the side or from a few words. After all, he had started to take over the resources of the Qin family and was unveiling the mysterious veil bit by bit. He had thought that he would be sure after the spring festival. However, he did not expect that the first step he took today would completely shock him. It was completely beyond his imagination. However, he could already be sure about the Zhu family. It was clear from the moment he saw his uncle. After all, his uncle's identity was there. He just needed to check it out a little. This was also the fundamental reason why Qin Xing had the confidence to face Yan Chaozong's group of sworn enemies. At this moment, Qin Ran did not notice Qin Xing's strange expression at all. She slowly walked to the kind-looking old man sitting in the main seat. There were 2 red futons at the feet of the old man. Qin Ran smiled and knelt down. Ran Ran wishes Grandpa Song a happy new year. May everything go well and you live a long and healthy life. Qin Xing was staring at the old man not far away rudely. The rest of the Song family did not have any opinions. They could completely understand the reaction of the child in front of them. Obviously, the one in the Qin family did not tell the child the background of the Song family. Otherwise, he would not be like this after seeing the old master. The young man sitting at the very bottom was slightly displeased and somewhat disappointed. Was this the future brother-in-law? Alas! The young man sighed subconsciously. How could his arrogant cousin fall in love with this man from the Qin family? He did not know what Grandpa was thinking. It was not until he heard his sister's familiar voice that he came back to his senses. He also sensed the young man's dissatisfaction with him. He could not help scolding himself in his heart for not being promising at all and failing at the crucial moment. Now he was representing the Qin family. Girl, get up quickly. The ground is cold. You haven't come to see Grandpa for a long time. The old master bowed slightly and stretched out his hand. He was very thin and his face was full of wrinkles and age spots. However, he gave people an indescribable aura, totally different from ordinary old people. Qin Ran did not dare to let the old man bend down to help her. She quickly stood up to support the old man and said, "Grandpa Song, I'm afraid that some people don't welcome me." After Qin Ran said that, she deliberately glanced at the young man below. When the others heard this, they all laughed at the same time. What a pair of enemies! Unfortunately, they were not fated to be together. Oh ha ha ha, you two kids always bicker every time you meet. The old man clearly knew the relationship between his grandson and the Qin family's girl. He could not help laughing. The young man stared back at Qin Ran without changing his expression, as if he was deliberately provoking her. Qin Ran ignored him and looked at Qin Xing, who had come to his senses and was walking over. She said, "Qin Xing, come here quickly and wish Grandpa Song a Happy New Year." It was only then that everyone withdrew their gazes and looked at the young man in front of them again. It was as if they wanted to see through Qin Xing's soul, which made him very uncomfortable. After the old master looked at Qin Xing again, the smile on his face gradually disappeared. He sighed inexplicably, and there was some sadness in his eyes. Of course, he knew these past events of the Qin family better than anyone else. He did not dare to comment on the storm that year, but it did almost destroy the Qin family. Some time ago, when Qin Chang'an called him and told him about this, he did not come to his senses for a long time. First, he felt that Qin Xing had a hard life. He was innocent, but he had been wronged for so many years. However, what made him feel relieved was that he finally came back. Second, he also knew that his old friend had died a few years ago. After waiting for so many years, he finally got this news, which made him feel somewhat sad. After all, he was indebted to his old friend, which was also an important reason why he took care of Qin Chang'an so much. He just wanted to return the Qin family's favor. It had been more than 20 years since they last met. When the old master saw Qin Xing, he thought of the story of his old friend, which was why he let out a sigh. Qin Xing slowly knelt down on the rush cushion and said in a low voice, "Qin Xing wishes Grandpa Song a Happy New Year." There were no overly polite words, just simple blessings. After all, he was not as familiar with the Song family as his sister was. Moreover, he had not recovered from the shock just now. He did not know how to face this old man who used to be a god. "Child, get up, get up." The old man subconsciously wanted to help Qin Xing up. Qin Ran hurriedly gestured for Qin Xing to get up. After all, the old man was so old, they could not afford any accident. Qin Xing stood up slowly, bowed slightly and looked at the old man with a smile. The old man reached out to hold Qin Xing's hand and said, "Little guy, you have grown up. You definitely can't remember that when I held you when you were young, you peed all over me." Qin Xing hurriedly took 2 steps forward and took the old man's hand. He could feel the strength of the old man's hand. Although he could not remember those stories when he was young, he could feel that the old man valued him. "Dad, let the 2 children sit down and talk." The middle-aged man on the left side smiled and tried to smooth things over. He was also afraid that the old man would be too excited. The old man came to his senses and said, "I'm happy. Shall he bring a chair over and let the children sit next to me? I want to have a good talk with them." Shao He was the secretary whom Qin Ran called Uncle He. He nodded with a smile and took 2 chairs from the back. The young man stood up and took one of them. When he walked to Qin Ran's side, he said in a voice that only they could hear, "Is your brother just SOSO?" After hearing this, Qin Ran looked very unhappy. When she took the chair, she did not hesitate to step on the tip of the man's foot when no one was paying attention. The man almost cried out in pain. When he wanted to question her, Qin Ran was already chatting with the old man. He had no choice but to take it. "Have you seen your grandmother?" the old man asked casually after Qin Ran and Qin Xing sat down. He was very familiar with the old lady of the Zhu family. After all, they had been old friends for many years. However, the old lady lived in Shanghai most of the time and seldom went back to Beijing. They had not seen each other for some time. After all, the old lady was born in a big family in Shanghai and was used to life there. Qin Ran replied with a smile, "Grandpa Song, not yet. My brother and I are going to Shanghai on the 3rd day of the Chinese New Year. Grandma doesn't know that my brother is back yet." "Oh, you hit it well. Even the old lady doesn't know. But if she knew, she would be very happy. I remember that every time I went there, the old lady praised Qin Xing a lot," the old man said with a smile. Qin Ran looked at Qin Xing and nodded with a smile. "Grandpa Song is right. Grandma loves him the most." At this time, the old man seemed to think of something. He squinted at the middle-aged man on the right and said, "Xingwen, where is your? Wasn't she here just now?" The middle-aged man's face changed slightly. What was to come would come eventually. So he ordered the young man downstairs, "Hushing, call Yuer over." Song Hushing nodded and looked at Qin Xing, who was not far away. He stood up thoughtfully and walked out of the living room. Apart from when he was a child, this was the first time he had seen Qin Xing. He did not know why he had a natural resistance to this man. Maybe it was because of the marriage. He felt that no one was worthy of his cousin, including the man in front of him. However, he was not a stranger to Qin Ran. After all, they had almost been together. Unfortunately, some people had made things difficult for them. Maybe it was fate that they were not fated to be together. So until now, his friends in the circle still joked about this matter. Just when Song Hushing was about to open the door and go out, the living room door was pushed open from the outside. He heard a woman's clear voice saying, "Grandpa, I'm here." Chapter 396. A Blind Date. Chapter 395. Let's adjust the update time. It will be at 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock in the future. The Song family had been keeping a low profile for so many years, mainly because the old master was very strict with his family. Just like the Yen family motto, born in troubled times, grown up in the army, wandered about, and learned much. The old master's life was like this. He was born in that unstable era, grew up in the merciless war, and finally climbed out of the pile of corpses. He lived at the top of the court and witnessed the process of the country and its people going from troubled times to prosperous times. The old master cultivated his moral character, took care of the family, and pacified the world. He never dared to be negligent, because he often thought about why he was still alive, while his comrades, brothers, and friends died in troubled times. He did not dare to attribute his current position to his own hard work. It was fought for by thousands of people, so he was strict with himself and his descendants. If they had any pride of being born in this family or used the family's achievements for the slightest benefit, they would be scolded and reprimanded by him. Therefore, the second generation of the Song family was very ordinary and did not have any great achievement. Basically, they all worked in the government offices. However, in the third generation there were 2 outstanding juniors. One was Song Hushing, who was sitting below. Many people had high hopes for him, and he was one of the core figures among the young people of this generation in Seju City. After graduating from graduate school, he started training at the grassroots level. He took one step at a time. Whether it was the leaders or his colleagues, they all spoke highly of him. Moreover, he was willing to do practical things, and his conduct was excellent. Now, he was already a deputy director of a department with real power, and his future was limitless. The other was the woman who had just pushed the door open. She was the youngest granddaughter of the old master and also Song Hushing's cousin. How did many people evaluate her? Just like her name, Song Ryu, she was a gentleman, gentle as jade. If a woman was described as a gentleman, then this woman was not simple. She was an extraordinary woman in the world, and also a clear stream in this impetuous society. At this moment, Qin Xing did not know who this woman was, but he was attracted by her temperament. He did not know how to describe this woman's temperament. It was like seeing a stranger and knowing that she must be a good person at first glance. The woman was very beautiful, no worse than his sister. However, Qin Xing felt that it was an insult to pay attention to her appearance at this moment, because her temperament had already covered her beauty. She tied her hair with the most common black hairband, without any makeup. Her clothes were also very simple. She wore a gray sweater and a light-colored coat and white jeans and a pair of black cloth shoes. Qin Xing was surprised. When Qin Xing was young, he loved to wear this kind of cloth shoes the most. They were not the old Beijing cloth shoes that could be bought outside. Instead, they were the layers of soles made by the aunties in the village. They were especially comfortable and sturdy. However, he had not worn them in recent years. Therefore, when he saw the woman in front of him wearing black cloth shoes, Qin Xing was absent-minded. The old master's eyes were full of love when he saw his granddaughter. This kind of cloth shoes made by the aunties in the village was very comfortable and solid. He had not worn them in recent years, so he was absent-minded when he saw this woman wearing black cloth shoes. Are you in the study again?" The old master's eyes were full of love when he saw his granddaughter. Was the youngest of all his grandchildren, but she was also the one he was most satisfied with and appreciated. The old master sometimes wondered if the old man of the Qin family had already seen through the secrets of heaven, so he had played such a joke on him. Song Ryu pursed her lips and smiled without showing her teeth, but her eyes were full of smiles, like the warm sun outside, which made people feel very friendly. "Sister Ran, long time no see. You look a little haggard." Song Ryu walked to Qin Ran and Qin Xing and smiled. Her steps were very light, like a spring breeze. Wherever she walked, the grass and trees would flourish. Qin Ran liked this woman from the Song family very much. She was used to all kinds of women, but Song Ryu was unique. Her character seemed to be incompatible with the secular world, but she had a unique way to blend in. Qin Ran could not help thinking that it might be a good thing for such a woman to marry into the Qin family. Qin Ran did not know why she felt ashamed every time she saw Song Ryu. She smiled faintly and said, "Ryu, I am haggard, but you are getting more and more beautiful." Song Ryu lowered her head slightly and said shyly, "Sister, you are joking again." She actually did not like to be called beautiful by others, especially by strangers, but she was relatively familiar with Qin Ran, so she was not angry. Do you know who he is?" Old Master Song pointed at Qin Xing and said calmly. They had met several times when they were young. But those memories were a little distant, so they probably could not remember them. Song Ryu did not know who would come to pay New Year's greetings today. After all, many people came to pay New Year's greetings every year. But she was not here most of the time. She knew that Uncle Qin and Sister Ran would come to pay New Year's greetings on the morning of the first day of every year. She had met them a few times. But this year, she was a little confused about why Grandpa asked them to come so early on the morning of the first day of every year. She thought there would be some distinguished guests, but she had not seen them until now. Of course, she did not think that Sister Ran and this man would be distinguished guests that Grandpa would pay so much attention to. Maybe only those leaders or old friends could make Grandpa pay attention to them. Song Ryu first smiled and nodded at Qin Shing. She did not look him up and down impolitely. Then she slightly frowned and looked at Qin Shing a few times. It was not long or short, so Qin Shing did not feel disgusted or looked down upon. From these little things, Qin Shing could see Song Ryu's character. Then Song Ryu looked at Grandpa, smiled and shook her head. Grandpa, I really didn't recognize him. I'm afraid that I haven't seen him for many years. Otherwise, I would have remembered him. Old Master squinted and smiled. Then he explained to his granddaughter, "Ha ha ha, even I didn't recognize him." Of course you didn't recognize him. In fact, you haven't seen him for 22 years. He is the naughty boy who brought you candied fruits every time when you were little. Originally, Song Ryu looked very calm. But after hearing Grandpa's words, she became a little absent-minded and murmured, "Qin Shing?" Old Master had done what he should do. The rest of the things were left to the two children to catch up. So he said, Take Qin Shing to the yard. I have something to ask your sister Ran." Although Song Ryu was still in a daze, she nodded and said softly, "Okay." When she turned around, Song Ryu couldn't help but look at Qin Shing. It had been more than 20 years. She didn't expect to see Qin Shing again. She had heard about the past of the Qin family from her grandpa and knew that the boy, who always smiled from ear to ear, had disappeared. She didn't expect to see him again today. Qin Shing looked at Qin Ran and smiled at Grandpa Song. Then he nodded to the others and followed Song Ryu out of the yard. In the yard, the sun was just right. The flowers and trees were stretching their muscles and bones, enjoying the rare sunshine. Song Ryu, who was walking in front, happened to be standing under a tree. The sunlight shone on her through the gaps between the trees, which made Qin Shing feel like he had seen her somewhere. Of course, it was not when he was little. After all, he had long forgotten about it. "I didn't expect to see you again." Song Ryu turned around and looked at Qin Shing. She smiled shyly and said, "I only remember what you looked like when you were little. I really can't recognize you now." Qin Shing didn't know why Grandpa Song asked him to follow this woman. Although Grandpa Song said that they knew each other when they were little, Qin Shing had long forgotten about it. He really didn't know what to talk about with this woman. He didn't know why he didn't have any confidence in front of this woman. "I almost forgot everything when I was little. I can only remember my mother. I can't even recognize my sister. I didn't expect life to be so magical." Qin Shing smiled bitterly. He didn't want to talk about the past. It was all in the past, and there was no right or wrong. Song Ryu could feel the sadness in Qin Shing's words. She focused on her mother. She knew that Aunt Zhu had passed away when Qin Shing was little. She wanted to comfort him, but she didn't know what to say. She also knew that anything she said would be hypocritical and polite, so she didn't say anything. "You know my name, but I don't know yours." Qin Shing heard Grandpa Song calling her Yuer. He couldn't call her Yuer, so he took the initiative to ask. Song Ryu said lightly, "Song Ryu." Running away, shining brilliance. "A gentleman is like a jade, precious for his elegance. A gentleman is like a jade, gentle as jade. A gentleman is like a jade, cut and chiseled." Is that Ryu? Qin Shing had a good impression of this name, but then he said, "I'm not showing off. I just said it subconsciously." Qin Shing's cautiousness made Song Ryu laugh. "Yes, it's Ryu. But I'm not that sensitive." "Good name." Qin Shing couldn't help but say. He didn't think it was inappropriate. It was a good name for both men and women. Confucianism emphasized the golden mean and worshipped gentlemen. The two words, Ryu, matched the original meaning. While Qin Sheng was speaking, Song Ryu was still looking at him up and down calmly. Especially when Qin Sheng was speaking, she kept staring at his eyes, trying to find out something from him. She had recovered from the initial absent-mindedness and surprise. In fact, when she guessed Qin Sheng's name, she already knew why Grandpa had asked them to come so early today. Obviously, the others should have known the reason, but they just hid it from her. Everyone thought that she didn't know the past between the Song and the Qin family, but she had known it a long time ago. Her grandmother, who had passed away many years ago, had once spilled the beans. At that time, she thought it was interesting, but she didn't take it seriously. Moreover, she knew that the man of the Qin family had been missing for many years, but she didn't expect that the Qin family would find him, let alone see him today. Chapter 397. Let's talk about it. The second update is here. Keep up the pace and ask for some monthly vote. The door of the main hall was closed by Secretary He, so the people inside could not see Qin Sheng and Song Ryu outside, so that they would not be under too much pressure. They could take their time to get to know each other and catch up with each other. Old Master Song was not worried about the awkward silence between the two children. First of all, he was very confident in his granddaughter's ability to get along with others. Most importantly, in any case, they used to be playmates. More or less, they would have something to talk about. Moreover, Qin Sheng did not look that dull. Ran, are you satisfied with Ryu? Don't bully Ryu in the future, teased Old Man Song. When the men heard this, their hearts couldn't help thumping. Old Man Song was determined to marry Yu into the Qin family. He didn't even ask for their opinions, let alone whether Yu was willing or not. Qin Ran was also stunned. She did not expect Old Master Song to be so direct. She did not know how to answer. After all, she dared not say yes casually. After all, Qin Sheng's girlfriend was Lin Su, although she was satisfied with Song Ryu. Grandpa Song, I think it depends on their attitude towards each other. We can't force them, Qin Ran said in a euphemistic way. Old Master Song chuckled and said, Your grandfather and I agreed on this. It's also a way for our families to get closer and become friends. Originally, we wanted to matchmake you and Husheng. Who knew that you two were quarrelsome lovers? Now, it's up to Qin Sheng and Ryu. Although I've only seen Qin Sheng after more than 20 years, I'm quite satisfied with this kid. I think I'm quite good at judging people. After all, he was taught by your grandfather. As for Yu, I will communicate with her. Of course, both of them need to agree. I am not that stubborn. Qin Ran was a little hesitant. She smiled and said, Grandpa Song, you are right. I am afraid that Ryu is too excellent for Qin Sheng. You don't have to worry about that. Although Yu is arrogant, a girl will eventually marry a man. Old Master Song laughed. He was in charge of everything in the Song family, so these juniors did not dare to disobey him. Moreover, he knew his granddaughter well, so he believed that it would be a sure thing. Qin Ran did not dare to say anything more, for fear that Old Master Song would be displeased or that the other members of the Song family would be angry. The men of the Song family all sighed in their hearts. If the old man really wanted to force her, Ryu, who had no desires, might directly agree. After all, Ryu had always been obedient to the old man, not to mention that she had no one she liked so far. Song Husheng was even more upset. But what could he do in such a family? He once asked Ryu her opinion on marriage in private. Ryu's answer shocked him. Sometimes he couldn't help but sigh. It wasn't good for a woman to be too outstanding. In the yard outside, Qin Sheng and Song Ryu did not know what had happened inside. Song Ryu had guessed it, but Qin Sheng was still kept in the dark. However, this was not a bad thing. At least Qin Sheng and Song Ryu would not be too hostile to each other. Otherwise, the Song family would be unhappy. So, you've been in Xi'an all these years. I've been there a few times. I like the Bailin Museum the most and often recommend it to my friends. Unfortunately, most people only like that kind of bustling place, not this kind of place with real cultural heritage, Song Ryu said in surprise after learning that Qin Shing had been living in Xi'an. However, she was somewhat curious about why the Qin family hadn't found him after so many years. It did not occur to Qin Shing that the woman in front of him actually liked the Bailin Museum, which made him have a good impression on her. At least, such a woman had a lot of inner qualities. However, it made sense when he thought about it. How could a woman with such temperament not have inner qualities? How could she be like those vulgar rouge and powder outside? Moreover, her name was Song Ryu. The 4 books and 5 classics carved on stone in the Bailin Museum were very impressive. Qin Shing chuckled and said, I didn't expect you to like the Bailin Museum. I also like that place the most. When I was young, my grandfather would throw me there during winter and summer vacations to practice calligraphy and copy famous calligraphy. Really? Qin Shing's answer also surprised Song Ryu. She then said, Then your calligraphy must be very good, right? Qin Shing said modestly, Ha ha ha, I'm still not as good as my grandfather. But my sister said that I was bragging, and she never believed me. Song Ryu smiled faintly and said, I believe you, because I can smell the faint smell of brush and ink on you. However, after saying that, Song Ryu felt that what she said was a little strange. She lowered her head in embarrassment and hurriedly changed the topic. I like the preface to the Sanzang Holy Sect of the Tang Dynasty, which is the collection of Wang Shiji's books by monk Huairan in the Bailin Museum the most. Oh, I like Yan Zhenqing's Yan family temple stele, which is his masterpiece after his calligraphy reached the advanced level. Compared with the earlier stele of Duobao Pagoda, it is more amazing. Qin Shing said with interest, Everyone knows Wang Shiji's preface to the collection of Lanting collections, but they don't know Yan Zhenqing's second semi-cursive manuscripts of Nephew Ji. They are known as the double wall of semi-cursive. His competing for a seat, Nephew Ji and Uncle Ji are collectively known as the 3 manuscripts of Yan's calligraphy. Song Ryu knew all this. She had a deep understanding of classical Chinese culture, and her calligraphy level was not low. However, when she heard Qin Shing talking about this, she still listened quietly. At the same time, she appreciated Qin Shing very much. Not everyone knew these things. It seems that you like Yan Zhenqing, Song Ryu said thoughtfully. Qin Shing did not deny it. He smiled and said, Yes, I like him very much. My semi-cursive is inclined to him. Song Ryu hesitated for a moment and said, If you have time, can you copy Nephew Ji's manuscripts for me? I might be a little abrupt. Please don't mind me. I just want to like him. Qin Shing laughed and said, Ha ha ha, it's okay. I'll try to give it to you as soon as possible. But I'm afraid that I can't copy it well and make you laugh at me. Song Ryu smiled and said, I believe in your ability. At this time, a young man's harsh voice rang out. Who is this rich playboy who is hitting on my little aunt? I advise you to give up. My aunt won't like you. Qin Shing subconsciously looked at the source of the voice, which was also the direction of the door. He saw a middle-aged couple walking over slowly with a child who was less than 20 years old. The young child looked very arrogant and was dressed in fashionable clothes. His tone was full of disdain. Song Shigui, don't be rude. Have some manners, okay? Song Ryu scolded him rudely. Then she said to the middle-aged couple behind, Brother, sister-in-law, you're here. Is the old master inside? The middle-aged couple asked. At the same time, they quietly looked at Qin Shing. Who was this child? He could talk and laugh with Ryu. Song Ryu replied in a low voice, He's inside. The middle-aged man in a down jacket walked up to Qin Shing and said, I'm sorry. This child is too impolite. Qin Shing nodded at the middle-aged man with a smile, and did not say anything more. Song Ryu could not continue to chat with Qin Shing at this time. She took her brother, sister-in-law, and her little nephew to the main hall. Qin Shing walked at the back. The boy named Song Shigui threatened in a low voice, "I advise you not to have any ideas about my little aunt. Give up as soon as possible. If you dare to harass her, I'll definitely teach you a lesson." Qin Shing would not spoil this kind of lawless kid. He snorted and said, "Do you have a crush on your aunt?" When the boy heard Qin Shing's words, he flew into a rage out of humiliation and threw a punch at Qin Shing. Qin Shing grabbed his wrist without hesitation. He secretly exerted force and said, "You want to beat me up with your mediocre skills? I'm afraid that even 10 of you won't be a match for me. If we weren't here, I would have sent you to the hospital." Qin Shing's strength was not small. The boy grimaced in pain and almost screamed. At this time, Song Ryu just opened the door of the main hall. Qin Shing released him at the right time and kept a distance from the boy. The boy did not dare to say anything. He did not dare to act recklessly because he knew his great-grandfather's temper. He could not guarantee that he would be beaten, so he could only swallow the loss. Song Ryu opened the door and said, "Grandpa, brother and sister-in-law are here." Qin Ran, who was chatting inside, saw that there were guests in the Song family. She smiled and stood up. "Grandpa Song, we won't bother you anymore. We'll go back first. We'll come to see you another day." Old Master Song did not ask them to stay. He knew that the Qin family had other arrangements. He said directly, "Okay. Ran, I won't keep you. Let Xiao He see you out on my behalf." Qin Ran walked to Qin Shing and said goodbye to the other members of the Song family. Then they left. Secretary He walked them out. When Qin Shing turned around, Song Ryu gave him a faint smile. Song Hushing saw this detail, and could only sigh in his heart. After Qin Ran went out and got in the car, she asked casually, "How do you feel about Song Ryu?" Qin Shing did not know the deeper meaning of his sister's words. He was a little confused, but he still replied, "Well, how should I say it? I feel strange. Her temperament is very special. If I had to describe her, I would say that she is as gentle as jade." Qin Ran chuckled and said, "Ha ha, you don't know how many men in Siju City want to marry Song Ryu and how many people Grandpa Song has rejected. Those who can talk to Grandpa Song are not ordinary people. Song Ryu is even more arrogant. She has never fallen in love with anyone. But I also think that no man is worthy of her. When you get to know her better, you will know that she is not simple." Qin Shing did not answer. He could not say that he did not want to marry her and that it had nothing to do with him. He was afraid that he did not know when they would meet again. If he really said that and Qin Ran replied that he was engaged to her before she was born, Qin Shing would be so shocked that his jaw would drop. After Qin Ran and Qin Shing returned to the Sihiyuan of the Qin family, Qin Chang'an did not ask how things were in the Song family. He knew that Qin Ran would definitely report to him later. Then he arranged for Qin Ran to take Qin Shing to the next house. At this moment, in the Song family, Old Master Song had returned to the study from the main hall. The 3 men of the Song family were called in. Song Ryu was accompanying her brother and sister-in-law in the main hall, but her mind was in the study. She was smart enough to guess why Grandpa called her uncle, father and brother to the study. Chapter 398. Things were going to change. Qin Shing and Song Ryu were about the same age. Coincidentally, the daughters-in-law of the Song and the Qin family were both pregnant at that time, so the 2 old men made the engagement half-jokingly. It was an autumn afternoon, and the 2 old men took the time to visit Fragrant Mountain together. After all, the red leaves of Fragrant Mountain were an indispensable scenery in Siju City in autumn. It was famous both at home and abroad, and it was also one of the 4 famous places to enjoy maple trees. At that time, Siju City was not as big as it was now. Standing on the top of Fragrant Mountain, the Forbidden City could be seen clearly, unlike now, when it was completely blocked by the haze. Old Master Song took the initiative to talk about this topic. He smiled and asked, Old Qin, your wife is going to give birth soon. Do you think it's a girl or a boy? Old Master Qin shook his head and smiled. The Qin family is still going on, so I don't need to count. Maybe it's a girl in your family. Old Master Song was not convinced. Well, I don't believe it. Let's make a bet. I think it's a girl in your family and a boy in mine. Let's make a bet. I've never lost a bet. Old Master Qin said confidently, but what's the bet? I want to know if it's worth it. Old Master Song smiled. It's up to you. Then let's bet. If my family has a daughter and your family has a son, then by the same logic, if my family has a son and your family has a daughter, then our two families will become sworn brothers. If it's a boy or a girl, we'll pretend nothing happened. What do you think? Old Master Qin smiled faintly. Old Master Song laughed. That's a deal. As a result, this seemingly joking bet was made. Even though the winner was decided later, no one took it seriously and no one mentioned it again. Later, something happened to the Qin family. Old Master Qin took Qin Shing away from the center of this whirlpool. It had been more than 20 years since then. Old Master Qin didn't take it seriously, and Old Master Song didn't take it seriously either. After all, it was just a joke. However, the Song family owed the Qin family a favor, and the Qin family had been in such a big trouble, so Old Master Song kept it in his heart. Old Master Song had talked about this with Qin Chang'an several times. Qin Chang'an did not know about this at all. Of course, he did not dare to take the bet. After all, Qin Shing had been missing for so many years and his whereabouts were still unknown. If he agreed to the bet with Old Master Song, wouldn't he be delaying the Song family's miss? However, Old Master Song was insistent. In the end, if his granddaughter found someone she liked and he was satisfied, the matter would be left unsettled. If she didn't have a boyfriend or he was not satisfied with him, he would be to Qin's. The family's 2 girls and 3. Qin Shing to the Song, 1, and Qin Qin's long ago to be the Qin, 2, to the Qin family. She, the Song family's daughter, was excellent, but she was too proud to find a boyfriend. When Qin Chang'an found Qin Shing, he had no choice but to tell Old Master Song the truth. When Old Master Song heard the news, he was overjoyed. Qin Chang'an was even more embarrassed. He could only bite the bullet and go on. Qin Chang'an had no choice but to go on. So, today's blind date came into being. Old Master Song stared at his son and grandson, waiting for their answer. Song Hushing wasn't qualified to come in. After all, Song Ryu's brother was in the living room, but Old Master didn't let him in. However, the Song family had high hopes for Song Hushing, so Old Master made an exception. After Song Hushing found out about this matter, he already had a strong opinion about it. After seeing Qin Shing today, he felt that if he let his sister marry Qin Shing, it would be like a fresh cabbage being spoiled by a pig. How could Qin Shing be worthy of his sister? Grandpa, I don't think Qin Shing is worthy of you, Song Hushing said directly, even though he knew what his grandpa was thinking. As expected, after hearing this, Master Song's expression immediately changed. He snorted and said, You seem to be generous, but you're actually stingy. Do you think I'm bossy? Then why didn't you ask your sister's opinion before directly rejecting that kid from the Qin family? Grandpa, do you need to ask? My sister didn't like Qin Shing even though he was much better than Qin Shing? Song Hushan retorted disapprovingly. Old Master Song stared at him and said, Are you subconsciously against the Qin family because you didn't win Ran Ran's heart? Grandpa, it has nothing to do with me. I'm not that stingy. Song Hushan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Old Master Song said angrily, Others don't know your shortcomings, but I do. When it comes to your core interests, you're more stingy than anyone else. You can shut up. You two talk. Fu Shun, you're Yu-er's father. You talk first. The man named Fu Shun was Song Ryu's father. He had been doing research at the Academy of Social Sciences, so Song Ryu was more or less influenced by him. Song Fushun looked very approachable and didn't have a strong aura. He didn't dare to talk too much in front of Old Master Song. He smiled bitterly and said, "Dad, I think it depends on you's opinion. If she thinks it's good, we can talk about it. If she doesn't like it, we can't force her." "Okay, I'll ask you for her opinion later. But don't tell her about this. If I find out, you know the consequences," Old Master Song said firmly. Old Master Song's family rules were very strict, so no one dared to tell Song Ryu secretly. They didn't know that Song Ryu had already known about it. Song Hushing sighed helplessly. "Old Master Song, what's the point of asking for our opinions? It seems that you've long regarded Qin Shing as your only granddaughter's son-in-law." Song Hushing's father said, "Dad, in fact, it's not necessarily a bad thing for Ryu to marry into the Qin family. She's a girl with ideas. If she wants to do something, the Qin family can provide her with the most direct resources, unlike us. Regardless of whether it's good or bad for her, the future generations of the Song family will have more choices." Old Master Song said thoughtfully, "Okay, you're telling the truth. But I have to remind you that if you think that the Qin family is not good enough for the Song family, you're very wrong. You don't know Qin Chang'an's background at all. I guess many people have forgotten about Qin Chang'an's brother in Mount Wutai." The other members of the Song family didn't know what Old Master Song meant. They knew that Old Master Qin's eldest son had become a Buddhist for so many years. What power could he have? Of course, Qin Shing didn't know that the Song family was discussing the marriage between him and Song Ryu. If he had known, he would definitely have gotten even with Qin Chang'an. At this time, Qin Shing had already finished paying New Year's greetings to the second family under the guidance of his sister Qin Ran. This old man was not simple. He had helped Qin Chang'an a lot over these years. When Qin Shing saw the old man, he seemed to have some memories of him, but he didn't recognize him at that time. When he came out, he remembered who he was and was shocked again. Qin Ran brought Qin Shing to pay New Year's greetings. In fact, Qin Chang'an had already informed them. Otherwise, how could juniors like them be qualified to disturb the old man? The old man wanted Qin Shing and Qin Ran to stay for dinner, but Qin Ran politely refused. After all, there were other guests in the old man's house. These old men, who used to be in high positions, were actually no different from ordinary old people if one didn't observe them carefully. When they returned to the Qin family's Sihiyuan, the Qin family was still preparing lunch. At this time, there were already guests in the living room. A man and a woman, who were about 40 years old, were dressed in bright and beautiful clothes and looked very elegant. They sat on Qin Chang'an's left and right sides, chatting happily with each other. Seeing Qin Ran and Qin Shing coming in, Qin Chang'an said casually, "You're back." Qin Ran obviously knew them. She smiled and greeted them. "Uncle Hao, Auntie Chang, why are you here so early this year?" The middle-aged woman, who was called Auntie Chang by Qin Ran, was old but still charming. Her eyes were full of charm. She was wearing famous brands from head to toe. Since she could sit beside Qin Chang'an, of course, she was not an ordinary person. The middle-aged woman pursed her lips and smiled. "It's your father who asked us to come here. He said that he has something important to announce. We still don't know. He won't tell us even if we ask him. Actually, it's okay if he doesn't say it. I'm really afraid that he will arrange work for us during the spring festival." "Ha ha ha," the man called Uncle Hao said half-jokingly. In fact, at this time, both of them had their attention on Qin Shing, who was standing beside Qin Ran. Their facial expressions didn't seem to change, but they were looking at Qin Shing meaningfully. After all, a man who could appear in the Qin family's Sihiyuan and stand beside Qin Ran was obviously not an ordinary person. Could it be that he was Qin Ran's boyfriend? If he was really Qin Ran's boyfriend, Then they understood what Qin Chang'an was going to announce today. They were afraid that he was going to let this man enter the company. If that was the case, then they had to take it seriously. Qin Shing just smiled and nodded to the middle-aged man and woman. Of course, Qin Ran knew what was going to happen. At this time, Qin Chang'an stopped hiding and stood up slowly. The middle-aged man and woman also stood up, waiting for the answer. Qin Chang'an looked at Qin Shing and said firmly, "Let me formally introduce you. This is my son, Qin Shing." After hearing the news, the middle-aged man and woman's smiles on their faces stopped abruptly. Their brains went blank. Why didn't they know that Qin Chang'an had a son? Chapter 399. Sure enough, Uncle Hao and Auntie Chang were not ordinary people. Qin Chang'an had invited them to the Qin family for lunch on the first day of the Spring Festival and announced the news at the same time, which showed how important they were to Qin Chang'an. Most people did not know how big Qin Chang'an's business territory was, let alone Qin Shing. Even professional organizations might not know it if they did not investigate it carefully. The domestic capital market called Qin Chang'an's listed and unlisted companies Chang'an Group. In the early years, Chang'an Group had a wide range of business. It was involved in almost all the profitable industries, especially the real estate industry. It had invested in several companies. The consequence was that its business was too big, the battle line was too long, and the capital chain was too weak. Later, under the guidance of a master, Qin Chang'an built the core business of Chang'an Group around the pan-financial industry, with insurance, banking, securities and other main financial businesses as his left hand and private equity investment, angel investment and other investment holding businesses as his right hand. After several years, Chang'an Group was finally built into a capital giant. Therefore, the two people Qin Shing met today were the two big shots in charge of Chang'an Group. They were also Qin Chang'an's right-hand men. Their resumes and backgrounds were enough to make most people speechless. Every company had internal factions, which was equivalent to the court and Jianghu. It was the same inside Chang'an Group. As long as Qin Chang'an did not express his support, this kind of open and secret fight would continue. In fact, whether it was for Qin Chang'an or for the internal structure of the company, there were advantages and disadvantages. Qin Chang'an only needed to be careful. However, this balance was obviously going to be broken, because Qin Shing had appeared. Uncle Hao's name was Hao Mingyi, a Beijing native. After graduating from Tsinghua University, he went abroad to study and then worked in foreign financial institutions and the world's top 500 companies. Finally, he climbed to the highest position that a Chinese could climb in an international enterprise. Later, he returned to work in a central enterprise and taught part-time at Tsinghua University. In the end, he was poached by Qin Chang'an and became his confidant. Auntie Chang's name was Chang Sini, also a Beijing native. Her resume was basically similar to Hao Mingyi's, but her background was more profound. After all, she had worked in the central bank and the big four banks, which made most men feel ashamed. In addition, Qin Chang'an also had several trusted subordinates, all of whom were elites who had been trained both at home and abroad. This was also an important reason why the Chang'an Group could invest abroad so quickly. Unlike most of the private enterprises and central enterprises, most of them failed after they went abroad. Hao Mingyi and Chang Sini had been working for Qin Chang'an for many years, but they had never heard that Qin Chang'an had a son. They only knew about Qin Ran. Moreover, Qin Ran had been in charge of the angel investment company and had never entered the core management of Qin Chang'an's group. This was also Qin Chang'an's intention. Now that Qin Chang'an suddenly had a son and introduced him to them in such a formal manner, Hao Mingyi and Chang Sini, who could reach their current positions, must be extremely smart people. Smart people were smart people. They would not ask for a snub and waste time to find out the truth. They did not think that Qin Chang'an had randomly found a man to pretend to be his son to tease them. They also did not think about the origin of this son. After all, a man like Qin Chang'an could have 2 or 3 illegitimate children. Moreover, they also knew that Qin Chang'an had 2 or 3 female confidants. They would only think, what does the appearance of this son mean to them? Hao Mingyi and Chang Xinyi were still in shock, while Qin Sheng looked at them from head to toe. From their conversation, Qin Sheng had already guessed their identities. After all, Hao Mingyi had mentioned the word work. Obviously, these 2 men should be the executives of Qin Chang'an's company. The 2 of them looked like elites, who did not look like ordinary people at all. Qin Sheng greeted them calmly, "Hello, Uncle Hao, Auntie Chang." Hao Mingyi and Chang Xinyi came to their senses after Qin Sheng greeted them. They had experienced all kinds of situations. Chang Xinyi responded with a smile, "Hello, Qin Sheng. It's our first time meeting. I didn't prepare a gift for you. Boss, you didn't tell us in advance. I'll make it up to you next time." Qin Sheng felt that this woman was not simple. He replied, "Auntie Chang, you're welcome." Hao Mingyi said, "I was wondering why boss looked different this year." His eyes were full of smiles. "It's totally different from the past. Now I finally understand. It turns out that there's a happy occasion." Qin Chang'an had expected their reaction. After all, no one in the company knew that he had a son except for those who knew the past of the Qin family and his childhood friends. "Sit down. You don't have to be so polite at home," Qin Chang'an said casually. Then he told Qin Ran, go to the kitchen and see how the lunch is going. Qin Ran squinted and said, "Uncle Hao, Auntie Chang, please sit down. I'll chat with you later." After saying goodbye, Qin Ran left. She knew a lot about the company, but she was not willing to get involved. Firstly, she was not capable enough. Once she got involved, it would only do harm to the company. Secondly, she was not ambitious. Moreover, the old man was more energetic than anyone else. He did not need her help. After Qin Ran left, Qin Chang'an said, "Lao Hao Xinyi, you must be curious why I suddenly have a son. You may not know about the past of the Qin family. In fact, many people know about it, but no one in the company knows about it. When Qin Sheng was young, he was taken away by my old man. He just came back a while ago. Of course, you don't know about it. That's why I want to introduce him to you today." Hao Mingyi and Chang Xinyi looked at each other and did not say anything. They just smiled and waited for Qin Chang'an to continue. "Of course, I called you here today not only to let you meet Qin Sheng. Most importantly, I want to tell you something. Qin Sheng is studying in the School of Economics and Management of Tsinghua University. I want to let him start training in the company after he finishes his studies in April next year. You know that I'm old and don't have much energy. After all, I have to hand over the company to the next generation. It's time for me to be lazy and enjoy my old age. However, Qin Sheng is still young and lacks experience and ability. He doesn't know the company at all. So I need your help. I have never treated you as my subordinates. I treat you as like-minded friends. I have absolute trust in you. So Qin Sheng will rely on you in the future." Qin Chang'an seemed to be polite. This was completely different from his usual attitude towards the senior executive. Think about it, there are so many elites. If I can't control them, how much internal friction will there be in the company? Sure enough, Hao Mingyi and Chang Xinyi knew clearly that Qin Sheng was going to enter the company to inherit their boss's business. However, the internal structure of the company was extremely complicated. Moreover, all the companies under the company had local tyrants. In addition, the other shareholders were not simple. If Qin Sheng was not capable enough, once something happened to the big boss, many people would rise up in revolt. Hao Mingyi took the lead and said, "Boss, it's our responsibility. You don't have to be so polite." Qin Chang'an smiled meaningfully and then looked at Chang Xinyi. Chang Xinyi took the opportunity and said, "Boss, as long as Qin Shing enters the company, we will definitely train him well. It's a piece of cake. He won't let you down in the future." Qin Chang'an did not say anything, but Qin Shing said in a timely manner, "Thank you, Uncle Hao and Auntie Chong. I hope that Uncle Hao and Auntie Chong can take care of me in the future. If Qin Shing does something wrong, I hope that you don't mind my identity. Just scold me when you need to. I will start from the bottom and do it step by step until you are satisfied." Although Qin Shing didn't know about today's arrangement, he already knew that he would enter the company sooner or later. So he didn't resist at all. Qin Shing's words were very modest. At least, he left a good impression on Hao Mingyi and Chong Sini. In fact, they were most afraid that Qin Shing was the kind of ignorant and domineering rich playboy who would criticize the company. They were afraid that the senior executives and shareholders would be disgusted when he entered the company. At this time, Qin Ran came back and said with a smile, "Dad, Uncle Hao, Aunt Chong, it's time to eat. Okay, let's go. You must be hungry. Let's go to the table and talk while eating." Qin Chang'an smiled and stood up. He was very satisfied with Hao Mingyi, Chong Sini, and Qin Shing's performance today. Of course, although he said he wanted to be lazy, he definitely wouldn't be lazy. He would watch Qin Shing get to this position behind the scenes and then completely let go. Otherwise, with such a big mess, not only Qin Shing would be in trouble, but the whole Qin family would also fall into the abyss of eternal damnation. Of course, Qin Chang'an wouldn't allow such a situation to happen. After all, the Qin family had worked hard for several generations to get to where they were today. He didn't want to be beaten back to the original position. During the meal, Qin Chang'an, Hao Mingyi, and Chong Sini casually talked about work and life. Qin Ran occasionally interrupted to lighten the atmosphere. Qin Shing just listened quietly. However, during the meal, Qin Chang'an indirectly told Hao Mingyi and Chong Sini not to let others know Qin Shing's identity. Otherwise, it would be hard for Qin Shing to exercise. Of course, the two understood and knew what to do. After lunch, Hao Mingyi and Chong Sini left. Qin Shing and Qin Ran didn't go out for the whole afternoon. There were also several groups of guests in the Qin family, but they were all Qin Chang'an's friends or juniors. Qin Chang'an didn't see any guests, so he introduced Qin Shing's identity. Everyone's reaction was similar. In the evening, there were finally no more guests. Qin Chang'an also went out and asked some friends who had returned to Beijing to have a small gathering. Qin Shing was a little tired. To be honest, he didn't like to deal with things like this. But he had no choice now. It was something he had to face. Qin Ran laughed and said, "Are you a little tired?" "Not bad," Qin Shing, who was lying on the sofa and watching TV, said casually. Qin Ran pulled Qin Shing up from the sofa and said, "Let's go. Don't be cooped up at home. Sister will take you out to relax." "Where?" Qin Shing frowned and asked. Qin Ran deliberately kept him guessing. "You'll know when we get there." Chapter 400. Would there be trouble? Qin Ran actually knew that Qin Shing was not willing to mingle in this kind of social circle. However, he had to inherit Qin Chang'an's career, pay New Year's greetings to the Qin family's old friends, and face these tycoons and juniors who came to pay New Year's greetings to Qin Chang'an. When he returned to the Qin family, he had to face these things. There was no way to avoid them. You could only choose to accept them. It was as simple as that. Therefore, since Qin Chang'an had announced Qin Shing's identity to the world, if Qin Shing stood still, there would naturally be people who would approach him and pull him into the so-called big and small circles one after another. There were good and bad people among these people. Qin Shing definitely wouldn't know for a while. Maybe time would reveal a person's heart, or maybe he would only understand after suffering a few losses. Qin Shing might not care about it, but of course he cared about it. He didn't want his brother to be bullied. Therefore, she took Qin Shing into her circle first. At least she knew the good and bad people of these friends. In this way, they could help Qin Shing avoid some detours in the future. The place where Qin Ran took Qin Shing to today was a small gathering. This kind of gathering could not be organized by just one or two people. It was organized by the core figures of a few small circles. After all, at their age, most people had already stepped on the right track in their lives and needed a lot of resources. Therefore, this kind of gathering was held. The party wasn't the kind of place where young kids would casually drag their friends to create a mess. It was filled with second-generation rich kids, peripheral models, and so-called stars. It seemed lively, but in fact, it was meaningless. Compared to normal days, the New Year's Day was the biggest opportunity. Because most of these young people who went out of Siju City would come back for the new year. Some of them had small achievements in their careers. Plus the power of their families, they would definitely have a bright future in the business world. Some of them had entered the official career. They were either trained in ministries or held local posts. The worst among them was at least at the deputy division level. Those who did well were already in their 30s. To be able to have such achievements at such a young age, their own strength was one thing, but which one of them did not have a shocking background? Those who did business needed benefits, and those who entered the official career needed political achievements. This kind of binding, where everyone took what they needed, often led to unexpected gains. After all, there were too many examples in these years. However, this threshold was extraordinarily high. Not everyone could come here. Because many people had special identities, it was impossible for them to choose a place that was too eye-catching. The place was different every year. This year, they chose a boutique hotel that looked ordinary but was actually not ordinary. It was just that it was not open to the public these 2 days. After all, the boss was a young man. Actually, Qin Ran and Qin Shing were late. At this moment, the others had already arrived. After all, Qin Ran was a little tired today. It was too strenuous for her to talk to those uncles, grandfathers, and grandmothers. She had to be careful, for fear that she might say something wrong and offend them. If it were not for Ma Weiyang's continuous phone calls, she would have stayed at home to accompany Qin Shing to watch TV for a while. Moreover, she would have to work for another day tomorrow. She would have to go to Shanghai the day after tomorrow, which would be too much for her. Qin Ran was still driving the Audi A6L. She did not need to be wary of anything. Those in the system had to be careful. They either took a taxi, asked someone to send them, or only dared to drive an ordinary car. After parking the car at the entrance of the hotel, Qin Ran said to Qin Shing, after entering the hotel, "You go to find Ma Wei and the others first. I will come later. Otherwise, you will have to accompany me to deal with those boring people." Of course, Qin Ran's identity was the target of many people. With Qin Chang'an's influence in the business world, who would not be willing to rope her in? Of course, Qin Shing understood what his sister meant. He nodded with a smile and followed her arrangement. At the entrance of the hotel, there was a staff in charge of reception. After checking Qin Ran's identity, they let her in. They did not ask about Qin Shing's identity, because every invited member could bring a companion with them. There was no need to ask about their identity. After entering the hotel, Qin Ran asked Qin Shing to take the elevator first. She waited in the lobby for a while. After Qin Shing reached the floor, she took another elevator to go up. After all, this was a boutique hotel. The decoration style was relatively simple and elegant. After Qin Shing arrived at the floor where the restaurant was, he followed the sign and walked there. This was the hotel's Western restaurant. This time, it was specially renovated for the party. The inside was divided into large and small areas. In the middle, there were all kinds of wine and food. There was no messy dance floor or stage, and no host would give a speech, etc. It was just a place for people to get to know each other and talk about things. If they did not want to stay, they could leave. There were no rules. This was also the reason why people were willing to come. There were 2 security guards standing at the entrance of the restaurant. Obviously, they were not ordinary security guards. They should be specially hired. When Qin Shing walked to the door, he thought he would be checked again. Unexpectedly, the 2 security guards did not change their expressions. Qin Shing smiled awkwardly and went in. The restaurant was not big, but at this time there were dozens of people in it. There were men and women. Everyone was dressed in ordinary and simple clothes. There was no requirement for them to wear formal clothes or evening gowns. People were either standing in the middle area and talking and laughing, or sitting in groups on the seats on both sides, laughing and cursing. There were also 2 people sitting alone in the corner, talking in a low voice with serious expressions. Qin Shing stood at the door and looked around casually. He was not curious about this kind of scene. He was just looking for Ma Weiyang and the others. After a while, he found them sitting on the right side by the window. There were 2 circular sofas with 7 or 8 men and women sitting there. It was the liveliest place here. However, Qin Shing only knew Ma Weiyang, Fan Dezhi, and Yin Hao. Then, to Qin Shing's surprise, the young man he met in the Song family in the morning was also here. When Qin Shing came out of the Song family, he learned from his sister that the young man was Song Hushing, Song Ruyu's cousin. Qin Shing frowned slightly. He was not in a hurry to go over. He subconsciously looked for Song Ruyu, but then he could not help laughing. It seemed that Song Ruyu, a woman with such temperament, would not appear here. Otherwise, she would really be out of place. After letting out a sigh, Qin Shing walked over slowly. Along the way, no one talked to Qin Shing. They just looked at him up and down. After all, they had never seen this man before. Then they guessed his identity. There was an unwritten rule here, which was that no one would disturb a friend they did not know, unless a friend introduced them to each other. When Qin Shing walked to Ma Weiyang's side, some people became more and more confused. Who was this man? How could he know those people? He was not simple. Fan Dezhi was facing Qin Shing and saw him first. He smiled and waved his hand to say hello. "Little Shing, you are here." Hearing Fan Dezhi's words, Ma Weiyang turned around subconsciously. When she saw Qin Shing, she immediately got up and rushed to Qin Shing. She gave him a big hug and said coquettishly, "Oh, little Shing, I missed you so much. Why did you come so late?" Qin Shing was a little embarrassed. Except for Fan Dezhi and Yin Hao who knew Qin Shing, the others who did not know Qin Shing were quite puzzled. They did not know who this little Shing was. How could Ma Weiyang treat him in such a way? This was really enviable. Of course, this also included the outsiders who had been staring at Qin Shing or here. Ma Weiyang was a young married woman. Not to mention her temperament, her breasts and figure were enough to make people have a nosebleed. As a hot-blooded young man, Qin Shing could not stand it anymore. He quickly let go of Ma Weiyang and said, "Sister Ponytail, you are strangling me." Ma Weiyang let go of Qin Shing and said angrily, "You heartless man. Others don't even have this kind of treatment. How can you be so ungrateful?" Okay. I was wrong, okay?" Qin Shing begged helplessly. At this time, Fan Dezhi asked, "Why don't I see your sister?" Qin Shing turned to the door and happened to see his sister coming in. He chuckled and said, "Isn't she behind?" As soon as she came in, many friends who knew her went up to greet her. Qin Shing then understood why his sister let him come in first. Qin Shing smiled and nodded to Yin Hao. At this time, Ma Weiyang took Qin Shing's arm and said to Song Hushing and the others, "Let me introduce this handsome guy to you. He is I know I've seen him before. He is the eldest young master of the Qin family, Qin Rant's biological brother." Song Hushing interrupted before Ma Weiyang finished her introduction. After hearing Song Hushing's words, the others who did not know Qin Shing were instantly stunned and stared at him. They did not expect this young man to be such a person. This was big news. Ma Weiyang was quite surprised and said, "Damn, Lao Song, how did you know?" Oh, it seems that someone is still unwilling to give up. After all, Qin Sheng almost became your brother-in-law. Ma Weiyang, no one will think that you are mute if you don't speak. Song Husheng stared at Ma Weiyang and said angrily. Ma Weiyang said disapprovingly, Tut, 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 you don't even allow people to make jokes. So boring. Brother Song, we meet again. At this time, Qin Sheng took the initiative to greet Song Husheng. After all, the Qin family and the Song family were not simple. Of course, Qin Sheng had to be polite. Song Husheng smiled and stood up. I didn't expect it to be so fast, and I didn't expect it to be here. You are so fast. These words were a bit harsh. Qin Sheng could understand it no matter how stupid he was. He squinted and said, What do you mean by this, Brother Song? The conversation between the two made others feel a bit strange. Why was there a bit of a smell of gunpowder? Song Husheng did not bother to explain to Qin Sheng at all. He directly stood up and left, because if he did not leave, Qin Ran would come over. He did not want to face Qin Ran. In Song Husheng's eyes, Qin Sheng and he were not at the same level at all. Moreover, because of Ryu, Song Husheng was very disgusted with Qin Ran. He even scolded her secretly. Didn't you disappear for more than 20 years? Why didn't you die outside? Why did you show up at this time? Song Husheng just left like this, followed by two people. Because they were quite gossipy, they wanted to ask Song Husheng about Qin Sheng. This would definitely be a topic to chat with their friends tomorrow. Qin Sheng smiled bitterly and had no choice but to sit down with Ma Weiyang, who came back to her senses. She was puzzled and said, Little Sheng, when did you offend Song Husheng? Why does he speak so strangely? Sister Ponytail, I also want to know. Qin Sheng was speechless. Ma Weiyang said fiercely, It's okay, I will help you vent your anger later. Song Husheng is a bit too much. Qin Sheng casually said that it was okay to let Ma Weiyang calm down. At this time, Fandaji hurriedly changed the topic and introduced Qin Sheng to other friends. Just now, everyone already knew Qin Sheng's identity. After all, he was Qin Ran's brother, of course, they would treat him politely. Everyone laughed, drank, and chatted. The others were quite curious about Qin Sheng, and the topics they talked about were basically about Qin Sheng. However, with Ma Weiyang and Fandaji's help, Qin Sheng was quite relaxed. Otherwise, he would have to recount those old stories again. It was not easy for Qin Ran to walk along the way. Basically, after dealing with one group of people, another group would immediately surround him. Of course, Qin Ran had to give face to them. After all, everyone knew each other, and many of them had cooperated with each other. They could only smile and chat for a while. Therefore, when Qin Ran arrived here, nearly 20 minutes had passed. When Qin Ran walked over, Qin Sheng was frowning and staring at a few people not far away, especially a man among them. Qin Ran waved her hand in front of Qin Sheng's eyes and asked confusedly, What are you looking at? Whose girl are you attracted to? Qin Sheng suddenly opened his mouth and said, Sister, will there be trouble if we make trouble here? Chapter 401. Chapter 400. Chapter 400 Unbearable. There is only one update today. I've been busy for a whole day. If I have the ability, I'll definitely do 2 updates. I hope you can understand. Qin Ran was taken aback by Qin Sheng's sudden words. She did not know the reason behind it. Could it be that he had met someone who had a grudge against him, or had bullied him before? Qin Ran did not dare to say that there would not be any trouble. It was not that she was not confident, but that today's gathering was not simple. There were many rich playboys with hidden talents and many weirdos with prominent family backgrounds who kept a low profile. Facing most of the people here, Qin Ran was really not afraid that Qin Sheng would cause any trouble. It was just that it would be a little tricky to deal with it. If Qin Sheng provoked a small group of people, it would depend on the reason. For example, if they had bullied Qin Shing before, Qin Ran would have a reason to support Qin Shing. At least it was reasonable. Therefore, Qin Ran had to know the reason first. Qin Ran was still smiling. She looked at Qin Shing, who looked uncertain, and asked, "What's wrong? You met someone who bullied you before and you want me to help you vent your anger?" Qin Ran did not know whether to laugh or cry at Qin Shing's answer. His character was exactly the same as his father's. Because he said, "No, I just don't like some people." For a moment, Qin Ran did not know how to respond to his words. Of course, she would not reprimand him, but she felt that he was not the kind of person who was arrogant and domineering. There must be a reason. "Hence," she said, "then you have to give me a reason." "I feel that he is bullying my friend," Qin Shing said honestly. Qin Ran finally understood. She sighed and said, "Oh, I see. Then I have to know who you are unhappy with and what kind of trouble you want to cause. After all, some people today are really not simple. It's not that we don't dare to provoke them, it's just that it's a little troublesome for me to clean up after them." "Ha ha, sister, look at how scared you are. Is your brother a person who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth? Of course, I have to know whether I can provoke them or not. If I can't, I definitely won't court death. Even if I can, I will have a sense of propriety and reason with them first. If I can't reason with them, then I will see whose fist is harder." Qin Shing laughed in a low voice. Qin Shing made it sound simple, but Qin Ran was shocked. She glared at Qin Shing and said, "You are making fun of me on purpose. Now tell me, who do you dislike, so that I can tell you whether you can provoke them or not?" Qin Shing pointed at the group of people who were only 5 meters away from them and said, "The one on the right who doesn't look well is my friend. The woman beside him, I don't know who she is. She should be his girlfriend or friend. I just don't like the 2 men and the woman in front of him." Anyone could tell that Qin Shing's friend had been bullied, because his face was very ugly. The woman next to him looked angry, while the 2 men opposite them and the not-so-pretty woman had complacent smiles on their faces. Their eyes were full of disdain. Qin Ran squinted her eyes and looked at the group of people not far away from her. Qin Ran said meaningfully, "I don't know your friend. I know the woman beside him, but I don't have much contact with her. As for the 2 men on the opposite side, I know them. They are the ones who have just entered this circle. I don't know that woman, but I think she is at the same level as them." Qin Shing could not wait to go straight to the point. "Do you dare to provoke them or not? Go ahead. I will support you," Qin Ran said confidently. She felt lucky that the people Qin Shing wanted to provoke were not the troublesome ones. Hearing this, Qin Shing stood up and walked over without hesitation. After Qin Shing stood up and left, Ma Weiyang, who did not pay attention to the Qin siblings, asked confusedly, "Where is Qin Shing going? What were you talking about just now?" Qin Ran explained with a smile, "Just wait and watch the fun. In a while, you and I may have to support Qin Shing. Let's see whether those people are smart or not." Ma Weiyang was confused and did not know what she meant. Qin Ran did not explain either. She just stared at them. Among the group of people not far away, the man who was being bullied was none other than Qin Shing's dormitory mate, Chow Yufeng, who ranked second in the dormitory. The woman standing next to him was his newly engaged fiancée. Otherwise, Qin Shing wouldn't have wanted to stand up for someone he knew just because he had nothing better to do. After all, no matter how stupid he was, he knew that it was not appropriate to make trouble here. However, Qin Shing could ignore others, but he could not ignore this brother who had been with him for 4 years in the university. After all, they had skipped classes together, drank together, and fought together. After all, when he returned to Shanghai, this man knew it and directly rushed from Beijing to Shanghai from thousands of miles away, just to see him and get drunk with him. Then he hurried back to Beijing the next day. If there was no true love between them, with this man's calm character, how could he do such an impulsive thing? Therefore, no matter whether he could provoke him or not, Qin Shing would not flinch. He would definitely stand by his side and go through thick and thin with him. If anything happened, they would shoulder it together. After all, he could not watch him being bullied by others. After all, there were 4 people in the dormitory who fought and made trouble in the university. It did not occur to Qin Shing that he would meet Lao Er here, let alone in such a situation. This should be the second time he met Lao Er since he returned to Shanghai. Of course, it was mainly because of him. After all, he always disappeared for no reason. However, Lao Chao had been contacting him and often called him. He also knew that Lao Chao was too busy with work. Otherwise, he would have gone to Yangtze River Delta to find them. After all, he knew that Lao Chao was a man who wanted to go further, so he worked so hard. The man standing opposite Lao Chao said sarcastically, "Lao Chao, I was wondering why I met you here. Turns out that you came here with the help of a woman." Hearing this, Lao Chao's face fell. However, he could not afford to offend the man opposite him. It did not occur to him that he would meet this so-called rival in love here. If he had known this, he would definitely not have come. "Du Xian, what do you mean? Are you looking for trouble on purpose?" Lao Chao did not say anything, but his fiancée beside him could not help but say. Of course, she would not watch her man being bullied. The man called Du Xian said happily, "Xiao Xiao, I learned that you were engaged a few days ago. I thought that your family had chosen a Mr. Right for you. It was not until later that I knew it was him. You don't know how sorry I am for you." Du Xian's friend echoed and said, "Exactly. Xiao Xiao, based on your family background, you should find a man of equal social status. Otherwise, how could he be worthy of you? It did not occur to me that you found such a man." The woman called Xiao Xiao snorted and said, "Ding Wen, what kind of man I like has nothing to do with you. You are really a salty person." At this time, the beautiful woman, who was standing beside Du Xian and holding his arm tightly, looked at Chao Yufeng. A trace of gloominess and complacency flashed across her eyes as she said, "It did not occur to me that you are such a man. This society is really realistic. It is not until today that I know why you chose her instead of me. It is because I am too ordinary. She can help you get what you want. I misjudged you before." Upon hearing this, Xiao Xiao said impolitely, "It is not your turn to speak here." The beautiful woman was not afraid at all. After all, she was Du Xian's girlfriend. Du Xian would definitely protect her. As expected, Du Xian said unhappily, "Xiao Xiao, what do you mean by this? Can't you allow my girlfriend to complain a little? Should we all be like the man you found? He does not even dare to say anything. Don't you think he is a good-for-nothing?" The woman called Xiao Xiao looked at her man and felt somewhat sorry for him. She knew that he was not really a good-for-nothing. He just did not want to make trouble. At this time, after hesitating for a while, Chao Yufeng replied to the beautiful woman, "If I like her, I like her. If I don't like her, I don't like her. That is all. If you did this to take revenge on me, I could understand. But it is not worth it for you." Upon hearing this, the beautiful woman seemed to have been poked in her sore spot. She said angrily, "Chao Yufeng, what qualifications do you have to say that to me? Do you dare to say that you did not choose Luo Xiao for your future?" Chao Yufeng shook his head and smiled bitterly. He stared at the beautiful woman and said, "I dare to say that I did not. Do you dare to say that you really like Du Xian?" Upon hearing this, the smile on the beautiful woman's face disappeared instantly. She bit her lips and did not say anything. That was because she knew that this man was definitely not lying. Originally, she had thought that he had chosen Luo Xiao for his future. At least, she could accept this reason. However, the real answer was like this. She found it hard to accept it at the moment. It was true that she had done this to take revenge on Chao Yufeng. In the end, she had agreed to Du Xian, who had been pursuing her all the time. It was because Chao Yufeng was Du Xian's sworn enemy, be it in career or in love. However, Chao Yufeng did not dare to offend Du Xian because of his background. She had liked Chao Yufeng for 2 years. She had done everything that she could. However, she could not move Chao Yufeng. Since she could not get him, she would destroy him. Chao Yufeng, you chose Luo Xiu and wanted to climb higher. In that case, I would find your enemy and break your sweet dream. Upon hearing what Chao Yufeng had said, Luo Xiu felt touched and sweet in her heart. She did not regret choosing Chao Yufeng at all. Although she had doubted him before, after all, many of her friends had said so, she was willing to believe in him completely today. Originally, Du Xian hated Chao Yufeng because Chao Yufeng was more capable than him in his work unit and was valued by the leader. In terms of love, he was a complete loser. Since the woman he liked Chao Yufeng, how could he not hate Chao Yufeng? Of course, he knew that Kai Han had chosen him to take revenge on Chao Yufeng. This made him hate Chao Yufeng even more. As a result, Du Xian directly grabbed Chao Yufeng's collar and said, "Chao Yufeng, I dare you to say that again." "Do I need to say it again? Du Xian, you know it better than me." Chao Yufeng answered Du Xian without flinching. In the beginning, he had not been willing to make trouble because he knew what kind of place this was. If he really made trouble, not only would he suffer losses, but he would also bring trouble to Xiu Xiu. However, Chao Yufeng did not care about that anymore. He did not want others to say that the man Luo Xiu had chosen was a good-for-nothing. He did not care about how others thought of him. However, he cared about how others thought of Luo Xiu. Hardly had Chao Yufeng finished his words when Du Xian's fist smashed into Chao Yufeng's face. Chao Yufeng was hit so hard that he took several steps back. However, he just looked at Chao Yufeng smilingly as if he was looking at a pitiful loser. Chao Yufeng did not fight back. He could bear this punch. However, if Du Xian was aggressive, he would definitely not bear it. However, at this moment, a man who had walked over happened to witness this scene. The look on his face was extremely terrible. Chao Yufeng could bear it, but he could not. As a result, he said playfully, "Lao Er, when did you become so cowardly? You don't even dare to fight back after being beaten by others." Chapter 402. Chapter 401 Introduction. What explanation? In fact, Qin Sheng was not very clear about Chao Yufeng's family background. He only knew that all his family members were civil servants with a strong background. Therefore, after graduation, he took the civil servant exam and entered the system. Now, he was doing quite well. During his 4 years in college, Chao Yufeng had always kept a low profile and looked ordinary. He was not as cynical as Xia Ding, nor was he like Yu Kefi, who was not very eye-catching but could be seen everywhere that he was not simple. Often, Xia Ding and Yu Kefi made trouble outside, while Qin Sheng and Chao Yufeng cleaned up the mess. No matter what happened to the 4 people in the dormitory, no one would drop the ball. In recent years, Qin Sheng's life was quite rough. Except for meeting Xia Ding often, he only met Chao Yufeng and Yu Kefi a few times. However, they did not stop contacting each other. Their relationship was still there. They were the kind of brothers who did not contact each other for no reason. When Qin Sheng saw Chao Yufeng just now, he was more or less surprised. It did not occur to him that he would meet him here. Later, he figured it out. After all, Chao Yufeng was also from Beijing, and all his family members were civil servants. His background might be deeper than he had imagined. Qin Sheng did not know what conflict Lao Chao had with him. However, he did not care about this at this moment. Of course, he stood on Chao Yufeng's side without any reason. However, he did not expect that before he walked over, that man directly hit him. He was so aggressive that Qin Sheng could not help but feel annoyed. Anyway, his sister had said that they could do whatever they wanted, which meant that he was not a powerful man. Therefore, Qin Sheng was not worried at all. Moreover, it was that man who hit him first. He was just confused that Lao Chao did not dare to fight back when he was hit, which made Qin Sheng feel a little aggrieved. The movement here had attracted everyone's attention. After all, it was the first time that someone dared to hit him here. Chao Yufeng looked at Qin Sheng, who was walking over slowly. The expression on his face was extremely complicated. Obviously, he could not believe that he would meet Qin Sheng here. It was too incredible. After all, Chao Yufeng stayed in the system. After a short absent-mindedness, he returned to normal. However, he sighed with emotion and did not know what to say to Qin Sheng. "Big brother, why are you here?" Chao Yufeng asked uneasily. After all, he had been introduced to different friends by Luo Xiu and did not notice Qin Sheng at all. Qin Sheng squinted and said, "This is not the time to catch up." Qin Sheng turned around and looked at Du Xian, who had made a move. He said with great interest, "You actually dare to make a move here? It seems that your background is not simple. Yo, what's wrong? You want to stand up for him?" Du Xian stared at Qin Sheng and said thoughtfully. He had seen most of the people here, especially those whose family backgrounds were more illustrious than theirs. However, he had never seen Qin Sheng before. Consequently, he thought that Qin Sheng was more or less like Chao Yufeng, who had been brought here by others. After all, Chao Yufeng called him Big Brother. Qin Sheng took 2 steps forward and said directly to Du Xian, "No, I just don't like you." After Qin Sheng finished his words, he took action without any warning and kicked Du Xian's abdomen, making Du Xian fly out directly and fall heavily on the ground. He did not want to talk nonsense anymore. After all, Du Xian was already his opponent, so he did not need to reason with him. This scene shocked all the people who had been paying attention to this side. It did not occur to them that the conflict would become more and more intense. Some people had already started to walk over. Many of them were Du Xian's friends and the key figures in his circle. When Du Xian made his move, Qin Ran already knew the trend of this matter. It did not occur to her that Du Xian would dare to make a move here. Was he fearless, or did he not take Qin Sheng's friends seriously at all? Qin Ran knew Qin Sheng's temper. In addition, she had given him the bottom line just now. Consequently, he would definitely fight back without hesitation. As she had expected, Qin Sheng made a move last time without saying a word. Ma Weiyang had been staring at the other side. After seeing this scene, she was not worried at all. Instead, she said excitedly, F***ck. What a beautiful kick. It was clean and neat. It did not occur to me that our brother could be so handsome when he was fighting. Qin Ran had long been accustomed to Ma Weiyang's character of watching the fun. Anyway, no one dared to provoke her casually. She could only bully others. Of course, when she encountered those who could not be provoked, she would also keep a low profile. Fan Deji and Yin Hao frowned. They did not know why the fight had started. They asked in a hurry, "What's going on?" "The man who was beaten just now is Qin Sheng's friend," Qin Ran said truthfully. It could be considered as telling others that it was others who had made the move first. Even if there was a conflict later, they were in the right. This was very important. At this time, Qin Ran and the others had already noticed that the people in Du Xian's circle were all rushing to the center of the incident. Of course, they also had to support Qin Sheng. They stood up and walked over at the same time. In the center of the conflict, Du Xian had been sent flying by Qin Sheng's kick. Chao Yufeng was so scared that his face turned pale. He stopped Qin Sheng in a hurry and said, "Big brother, this is not the place to make trouble." Qin Sheng said disapprovingly, "If anything happens, I will take responsibility." He did not take Chao Yufeng's words seriously at all. It did not occur to Du Xian's best friend, Ding Wen, that this man in front of him dared to beat Du Xian. He rushed toward Qin Sheng without thinking. Even if he was beaten, he could not sit back and do nothing. Otherwise, his relationship with Du Xian would not be good in the future. Even in the circle, he would be looked down upon. Big brother, watch out. Seeing Ding Wen rushing over, Chao Yufeng pushed Qin Shing away in a hurry. However, he was not prepared at all. He was kicked on the shoulder by Ding Wen and staggered to the right several steps. If Luo Xiu had not supported him in a hurry, he would have almost fallen down. Ding Wen, who had taken advantage of Qin Shing, became more vigorous. He took the opportunity to punch Qin Shing, who was beside him. Qin Shing was a bit angry. He actually dared to make a sneak attack. He was really reckless. Consequently, Qin Shing grabbed Ding Wen's arm. It was not until this moment that Ding Wen realized from the man's attack and the strength that this man was a martial artist. However, it was too late. Qin Shing's fist had hit his abdomen. Ding Wen grimaced in pain. Following that, Qin Shing hit him with his knee and sent him flying backward. Like Du Xian, he lay on the ground. Du Xian's girlfriend, Kai Han, had long been frightened by the unexpected situation. She stood there in a daze and did not know what to do. After a long while, she came to herself and ran toward Du Xian in a hurry. Compared to Du Xian, Luo Xiu was quite calm, although she said that she was worried. She quickly thought about the storm that might be caused by this incident because Du Xian and Ding Wen were not ordinary people. Moreover, they were fighting and making trouble here. She did not know the identity of the big brother mentioned by Chao Yufeng. At least, she had never seen him before. However, she had to consider the worst result. Could she help Chao Yufeng and his big brother get out of trouble? Several key figures of Du Xian and Ding Wen's circle finally arrived. They said with a gloomy look, "How dare you make trouble here? You are really bold." After all, their friends, Du Xian and Ding Wen, were still lying on the ground. Qin Shing replied without flinching, "I think we all saw who started the fight first. If you don't know, you can play the surveillance video and have a look." Another man stood up and snorted as he said, "Is this the reason why you hurt them?" Qin Shing squinted as he said, "So you mean that you will help your relatives but not reason?" None of these people had seen Qin Shing before. Consequently, they did not take Qin Shing seriously at all. After all, they had been surrounded by all kinds of people and had not noticed Qin Shing. Moreover, Qin Shing had just arrived not long ago. "So what?" A man, who walked toward Du Xian and Ding Wen, spoke again. It was obvious that he wanted to support Du Xian and Ding Wen this time. After all, their families had a good relationship and they were all in the same system. At this time, Qin Ran, Ma Weiyang, and the others walked over. Ma Weiyang clapped her hands and sneered. "So what if it is true? I'd like to see how young Master Lu will side with his family over reason." Qin Ran walked up to Qin Shing, held his hand and asked, "Are you all right?" Qin Shing smiled awkwardly. He glanced at Chao Yufeng, whose face was a little swollen by his side, and said, "I'm fine. It's just that my friend was injured." At this moment, the focus of the conflict was no longer Qin Shing, Chao Yufeng, Du Xian, and Ding Wen. Instead, it was the conflict between the two circles. It did not occur to Chao Yufeng that this matter would be so serious. He looked at Qin Shing with confusion and worry in his eyes. Qin Ran patted Chao Yufeng's shoulder as she said with a smile, "Don't worry. The sky will not collapse." Chao Yufeng did not know Qin Ran, Ma Weiyang, and the others. However, Luo Xiu did not have any contact with them. After all, her family background was nothing in front of this group of people. However, a moment ago, Luo Xiu had been worried about how to deal with this matter, which was already a big trouble for her. But now, Luo Xiu did not have to worry about it anymore. She was just curious about the background of Chao Yufeng's boss. It seemed that he was quite familiar with this group of people. The man who had said, "So what?" a moment ago was a little timid. However, he still braced himself and said, "Sister Ponytail, what do you mean? Are you going to support him?" Ma Weiyang stared at him and said in an unfriendly tone, "My name is Ma Weiyang. How dare you call me Ponytail? Upon hearing this, Qin Sheng had to give Sister Ponytail a thumbs up. He liked her temper. She would help her relatives but not reason. Since Ma Weiyang had already stood up, Qin Ran also stood up and said, "Since you want to help your relatives but not reason, fine. Let's talk about reason. This is my brother Qin Sheng. How do you want to help them?" Though Fandaji, Yin Hao, and the others did not say anything, they all stood behind Qin Sheng without hesitation and stared at the group of people opposite them angrily. Their meaning was obvious. If you want to make trouble, let's see who is more powerful. If the younger ones are not good enough, let's use the older ones. At this moment, an elegant man walked to the front of Du Xian's group of people and said with a smile, "Qin Ran, you are being unreasonable. Everyone knows that you are the only daughter in your family. When did you have a younger brother? Even if you want to help him, you should not help him in this way, right?" Du Xian and Ding Wen had already been helped to stand up. However, they looked pretty terrible. After all, Qin Sheng's attack was much heavier than theirs. In the beginning, when they saw that their brothers from their circle had arrived, Du Xian and Ding Wen had planned to stand up and make trouble again. However, it did not occur to them that Ma Weiyang, Qin Ran, and the others would support this man, which made them lose their confidence instantly. However, when they saw the man in front of them, they became confident again. Ma Weiyang said sarcastically, "Well, I was wondering who it was. It turns out that it is Director Chen. Here comes the backbone. However, does the Qin family still need to report to you, Director Chen? You think too highly of yourself, don't you?" Ma Weiyang, Qin Ran, I don't care about the relationship between this man and you. Though Du Xian was wrong to attack first, shouldn't this man give us an explanation since he was so heavy-handed? The man, who was called Director Chen, said unhappily. This was related to the dignity of their circle. He would never flinch. At this moment, this place had become the focus of all the people present. Everyone began to gather here, wanting to know what had happened. At this moment, a man also walked over. He was Song Husheng. Chapter 403. The Peacemaker. Every circle had its core figures. There might be several of them, or there might be 2 or 3 of them. For example, the several people who had supported Du Xian and Ding Wen at the beginning were the core figures of their circle. Du Xian and Ding Wen were just marginal figures. However, there was only one core figure in every circle. Once there was one more core figure, the circle would inevitably be divided into 2 smaller circles. The core figure of Du Xian's circle was Chen Taihe. Ma Weiyang called him Director Chen. Although it was meant to be sarcastic, it was obvious that Chen Taihe had become a department-level cadre at the age of 30. As for his status as a director or deputy director, nobody knew. With a prominent family background and a good ability, it was not an exaggeration for him to become the core figure of the circle. Although it was said that Chen Taihe would help his relatives but not reason, if he was unreasonable, he could not stand to make trouble in such a place. There was a world of difference between being reasonable and not being reasonable. For example, if he was reasonable, his elders could clean up the mess no matter how big the trouble was. If he was unreasonable, it would be difficult for his elders to deal with it. However, since the matter had been exposed, as the backbone of the circle, Chen Taihe would never admit defeat. He had to support his circle. Otherwise, how could his circle convince the public in the future? Du Xian attacked first. Obviously, they had ignored him. Even if Chen Taihe came forward to help them, he would not have the confidence to do so. Since Du Xian attacked them first, Chen Taihe had to find a way to change the focus by saying that Du Xian was too cruel. It was just an ordinary conflict. Du Xian's cruel attack was a bit too much. If anything happened, who would be responsible for it? It was undeniable that Chen Taihe could find the most favorable reason in such a short time. It could be seen that he was extraordinarily smart. Although Chun Taiha's family was prominent, Ma Wei-yang didn't care about him at all. After all, the elders in Chun Taiha's family had retired. Those who were not in their positions would not meddle in politics. However, Ma Wei-yang's father was still in his position. This was her advantage. In the same way, Chun Taiha was not afraid of Ma Wei-yang. Although the elders of Ma Wei-yang's family had retired, their influence was still there. Moreover, they did not have any contact with each other, let alone being friends. However, Song Hushing's appearance broke the deadlock, because Song Hushing was the soul of Ma Wei-yang and Qin Ran's circle. This circle was a little special. In the beginning, it was just a small circle of best friends. Later, as they grew older, they got to know more and more friends, and it gradually evolved into a big circle. Within the big circle, there were several different small circles, but the soul was Song Hushing. Logically speaking, Song Hushing's father's generation had all been in the Qinshui Yamen. Now that they were almost retired, and none of his relatives were in high positions, how could they suppress these rich playboys? After all, in this circle, if one's family didn't have a current or former substitute committee member, one would be embarrassed to greet others. If one was one step higher, then one would be an absolute core figure in the circle, such as Ma Wei-yang. However, Ma Wei-yang did not care about these things at all. Moreover, she was a woman and did not pursue an official career. Then how did Song Hushing become a core figure in this circle? The reason was very simple. It was because Song Hushing had an awesome grandfather. He was really awesome, and his qualifications were there for all to see. Moreover, Song Hushing had high hopes placed on him since he was young and had been praised by many big shots. That was why he could have such achievement. At this moment, as soon as Song Hushing showed up, everyone knew that the scene was getting more and more lively. After all, Song Hushing and Chun Taiha were not on good terms. Moreover, Song Hushing's words were a little fierce. Obviously, he was challenging Chun Taiha. "You want an explanation? Let me see what kind of explanation you want." Therefore, the storm escalated again, and it became a duel between Song Hushing and Chun Taiha. "Lao Song, what do you mean?" Chun Taiha squinted his eyes and said with a fake smile. He did not expect that Song Hushing would stand up, which was a bit troublesome. Song Hushing's eyes were a little disdainful. He glanced at Qin Shing casually and said, "Qin Shing is not only Qin Ran's biological younger brother, but also my younger brother. He just paid a New Year's greeting to my grandfather this morning. Do you still want an explanation?" Song Hushing's words were equivalent to confirming Qin Shing's identity. No one doubted the relationship between Qin Shing and Qin Ran anymore. Moreover, Song Hushing deliberately revealed a piece of news, which was that Qin Shing just paid a New Year's greeting to Old Master Song. Chun Taiha did not know how to respond at the moment. After all, although Song Hushing mentioned Old Master Song, he was not supporting him, but Qin Shing, who was next to him. Chun Taiha was not willing to mention his elders to support Du Xian. After all, they were not that close. Most importantly, after confirming Qin Shing's identity, he would have to deal with Qin Shing's father. Du Xian's and Ding Wen's family backgrounds had been ignored by the Qin family. Could it be that Chun Taiha intended to take all the responsibilities on himself? The tit-for-tat confrontation between Song Hushing and Chun Taiha instantly made the atmosphere add daggers drawn. Those who were in the center of the storm were secretly fighting against each other, while the onlookers at the sidelines were indifferent. They were drinking red wine and watching the scene leisurely. At this time, if no one gave both sides a way out, they might fall out with each other. After all, no one could afford to take a step back at this time. However, the peacemaker should be powerful enough. Otherwise, he would not be qualified. However, if he was powerful enough, no one would be willing to get involved in this mess. It might be a strenuous and fruitless effort. However, someone still came out to be the peacemaker. After all, He could not let the matter get worse and go out of control in the end. Lao Chen, Lao Song, what are you two doing? It's just a small misunderstanding. Can't you just apologize to each other? Don't make it look like you have killed your father. At this time, a man in a gray shirt, accompanied by a man and a woman, walked over slowly. The man said with a casual smile. He did not take this trivial matter seriously at all. He was not afraid that these two would not give him face, because if they did, they would be really inconsiderate. He was giving them a way out. Both sides would be punished 50 times. There were only 2 people here who could speak. Since the man was flirting with girls in the corner, he could only be the peacemaker. If they missed this opportunity, they could make trouble as much as they wanted. As soon as the man showed up, everyone knew that they could not make trouble anymore. It was time for this storm to come to an end. Otherwise they would go too far. Chen Taihe lowered his head and admitted defeat first. It was impossible for him to continue to support Du Xian and Dingwen. He could not do it anymore because he had paid too high a price. Consequently, he said in a hurry, "Sixth brother, what you said is right. It's just a small misunderstanding. It's just a quarrel between a few kids. Du Xian, you beat them first." It did not occur to him that such a trivial matter would become so big. He could not help but curse in his heart that he had been too impulsive just now. Not only had he been beaten, but he had also become a joke. At the same time, he had offended many people. After this, he would definitely be reprimanded by Brother Chen again and would owe him a big favor. It did not occur to him that Chao Yufeng actually knew such a ruthless person who dared to help him here. Following that, so many big shots were involved. If he had known this, he would not have provoked Chao Yufeng even if he was beaten to death. Du Xian looked at Qin Sheng with an extremely terrible look. After all, this was the first time that he had suffered such a big loss. After being beaten, he had to apologize. In the end, he gritted his teeth and said, "I'm sorry." However, at this time, Qin Sheng said, "Not me." As soon as Qin Sheng said this, some people's expressions changed slightly. However, what Qin Sheng had said was not wrong, so they could not find fault with it. Du Xian lowered his head. The look in his eyes was quite vicious. Since the grudge had been formed, he would definitely take revenge on Qin Sheng in 10 or 20 years. A man should know when to yield and when to stand tall. Why would he be afraid of losing face? He just needed to lower his head to Chao Yufeng. Although he was very unwilling, he had no choice at this time. Consequently, before Chen Taihe said anything, he raised his head and said to Chao Yufeng again, "I'm sorry." Du Xian had already apologized. Now it was Qin Sheng's turn. The others all looked at Qin Sheng. Song Husheng also said in a low voice, "Qin Sheng." If it were not for the fact that she was afraid that the matter would continue to get out of hand, Qin Ran would not have asked Qin Sheng to lower his head and apologize. However, she had no choice now. Otherwise, she would offend too many people. Qin Sheng said lightly, "I'm sorry. I hit him a little too hard just now." What he said seemed to be an apology, but also not like one. It was more like a joke. Upon hearing this, Du Xian was stunned. F***ck. Is this a F***king apology? Song Husheng's expression changed slightly. She was a little angry but also inexplicably relieved. Chen Taihe stared at Qin Sheng. Is he not going to give me face? The man, who had taken the initiative to be a peacemaker, looked Qin Sheng up and down thoughtfully. He did not know why Qin Sheng was so courageous. The others all had different opinions about Qin Sheng's apology. However, at this time, no one dared to say anything. Qin Ran, Ma Weiyang, and the others did not know whether to laugh or cry. However, they gave Qin Sheng a thumbs up inwardly. In the end, Chen Taihe could not help but say, "That's it." The peacemaker had lost his patience. He put his arm around Chen Taihe's shoulder and said, "All right, Lao Chen. That's enough. And Lao Song, let's go and drink." Don't be disappointed by this trivial matter. Chen Taihe had no choice but to be dragged away. Today, he had lost his face. Song Husheng also left. However, before he left, he looked at Qin Sheng a few more times with a somewhat meaningful look in his eyes. Since the big shots had left, the storm had come to an end. This matter had been left unsettled. Unless someone did not want to live in this world, he would not continue to make trouble. Ma Weiyang held Qin Sheng's hand and said with a smile, "Brother, don't just stand there. Let's go and drink." Qin Sheng was not in a hurry to leave. Instead, he looked at Chow Yufeng and the woman beside him and said with a smile, "Let's go, Lao Er. It's time to catch up." A group of people left in this way, walking toward the seats where they had been sitting just now. Du Xian, Ding Wen, and the others, who were sitting opposite them, were also dragged away. Having suffered such a great loss, they probably did not want to stay here anymore. The onlookers left before them. After all, the fun had come to an end. Chapter 404. Chapter 403 Antroducitio, and that was the only way. Since Qin Sheng returned to Shanghai after disappearing for more than 2 years, Chow Yufeng had only seen him once. He was a man with ambitions and ideals. Meanwhile, his family placed high hopes on him and hoped that he could go further. Therefore, Chow Yufeng was under a lot of pressure. He had been more mature than his peers since he was a child. He didn't touch anything that he shouldn't touch. He could have chosen Peking University or Tsinghua University based on his grades in the college entrance examination. However, Chow Yufeng knew that staying in Beijing was too tempting. Therefore, he followed his family's arrangement and came to Shanghai without hesitation. During his 4 years in college, Chow Yufeng had never been in love. The number of times he skipped classes could be counted on one hand. He went to the library more often than Qin Sheng. After all, Qin Sheng sometimes went shopping with Su Qin. He majored in economics. However, he would attend the other 2 courses of the School of Economics, Finance and Public Finance, as long as there were no classes in his major, so that the teachers of the 2 majors thought he was a student of this major. At the same time, when he was a sophomore, he chose the second major, International Politics. It could be seen that Chow Yufeng had planned his life from the very beginning, which was an official career. Among the 4 roommates, Chow Yufeng was definitely the most hard-working one. Even Qin Sheng felt ashamed. He had a better family background, was better than you, and worked harder than you. If such a man didn't succeed, who else could? When he graduated from college, Chow Yufeng hesitated whether he should take the postgraduate entrance examination or not. After all, he had more choices after graduating from graduate school. However, Chow Yufeng decided not to take the postgraduate entrance examination. He chose to take the civil service examination first. Then he could work and take the postgraduate entrance examination at the same time. Therefore, in the past few years after graduation, Chow Yufeng had been very busy. He wished he could have 72 hours a day. He had achieved what he had today, not because of his family's help, but because of his hard work. Although his family had told him about it when he was interviewed by the ministry, his ability was still recognized. After graduation, working, taking the postgraduate entrance examination, getting promoted, and now getting engaged and preparing for marriage, Chow Yufeng had planned his life very well. He followed the prescribed order step by step and took every step steadily. As for his relationship with Luo Xiu, Chow Yufeng didn't know her family background at first. His friend introduced him to her. He liked this girl's simplicity and sincerity. Besides, they had many common hobbies and topics. Therefore, they finally got together. As for Kai Han, who had chased after him for 2 years, Chow Yufeng admitted that she was beautiful and excellent. However, there were too many good-looking people but too few interesting souls. Marriage was a lifelong event, not a child's play. Actually, Chow Yufeng had backed away from Luo Xiu. In fact, Chow Yufeng had hesitation with Luo Xiu's love. Yufeng was not a good match. Secondly, if he couldn't even face this pressure when it came to choosing a relationship, then his heart was too weak. 1 Feng S1 V2 1 1 1 1 1 2 1 1 he ana he and he. Chow Yufeng, Luo Xiu, followed Qin Sheng and sat down. The three of them sat on the side. Chow Yufeng recalled the past few years and looked Qin Sheng up and down. Xia Ding had told him that Qin Sheng had stayed in Shanghai for a while. Then he disappeared for half a year and went to Hangzhou to develop his career. Some time ago, Xia Ding had called him and told him that Qin Sheng had disappeared again. Chow Yufeng couldn't help wondering what Qin Sheng was doing. Why did he disappear all of a sudden? Today, he suddenly appeared here and supported him. However, after the New Year's Eve dinner last night, Chow Yufeng had a video chat with Xia Ding and Yu Kefi. Of course, they talked about Qin Sheng. Xia Ding said that he didn't know how to tell them about some things. He could only tell them that Big Brother had a hard time in the past few years, and that they should help Big Brother more when they became powerful in the future. Chow Yufeng didn't say anything at that time. That was because at present, Xia Ding and Yu Kefi could help Qin Sheng more directly. However, he needed to climb to a certain position before he could help Qin Sheng. Qin Sheng also explained to the others, Sister Ponytail, let me introduce him to you. This is my roommate for 4 years in college. He is also my good brother, Chow Yufeng. Otherwise, the others didn't know why he was so impulsive and didn't flinch at all. It was not until then that the others understood. Qin Ran also understood why Qin Sheng was so angry. It turned out that he was not just an ordinary friend. He was also his roommate for 4 years in college. In this case, she could understand. Ma Weiyang snorted. Oh, I see. Your brother. Today those fools got lucky. Brother, if you are still angry, I will help you vent your anger later. Ma Weiyang, who was annoyed by Chun Taihe, snorted. She was not afraid of Chun Taihe, but she had no way to deal with him. Besides, this matter had nothing to do with her. If Chun Taihe really provoked her, she would not care whether it was Chun Taihe or Li Taihe. She would definitely be unreasonable. Even though she was married, Ma Weiyang, who had never been serious, teased Qin Sheng again. But you were so handsome when you fought just now. Did you practice? If I wasn't married, I might have become your family's daughter-in-law. Even though she was married, she had never been serious. He said, I'm afraid that my brother-in-law heard it and blacklisted me in the future. Would he dare? Ma Weiyang found it funny. Her marriage was definitely a family alliance. However, she had no problem with it, because her husband treated her really well. As long as he didn't fool around outside, she could tolerate him. Consequently, everyone was envious of Ma Weiyang, who had found a good husband. Qin Ran stared at Ma Weiyang and said, Stop it, Ponytail. You are making fun of my brother again. Hearing Qin Ran's words, Ma Weiyang stopped. She turned around and chatted with Fan Deji and the others. Qin Ran looked at Chow Yufeng and said, Since you are Qin Sheng's roommate, you are also my brother. Is the injury on your face okay? Thank you for your concern, sister. It's not a big deal. I will be fine after I go back and put some ice on it. Sorry for the trouble today. Chow Yufeng was not so pretentious. It was not like he had never fought or been injured. Fortunately, it was the Spring Festival. If he went to work on a normal day, he might have a little trouble. You don't have to be so polite. Qin Ran looked at Luo Xiu and said, Your name is Xiu, right? I should have seen you a few times, but I met Uncle Luo more often. Qin Ran's words left a good impression on Luo Xiu. She said with a smile, Nice to meet you, Sister Ran. At this time, Qin Ran looked at Qin Sheng. Qin Sheng immediately understood what his sister meant. If they wanted to talk about the old days, it was obviously not suitable to stay here. Consequently, Qin Sheng stood up and said goodbye to Ma Weiyang and the others. Then he left with Chao Yufeng and Luo Xiu. Although it was the Spring Festival, there were still a lot of restaurants open in the vast city of Beijing. After all, for many people, they could celebrate the Spring Festival next year, but they could not miss the money. This place was not far from Gui Street. After Qin Sheng went out, he took a taxi to Gui Street with Chao Yufeng and Luo Xiu, and arrived in a few minutes. Qin Sheng was not familiar with this place, so Chao Yufeng chose a restaurant called Tong Lo, where he often came to eat crayfish. They entered the restaurant, found a table, and ordered. It was not until then that Qin Sheng looked at Luo Xiu and said to Chao Yufeng, "What? Are you not going to introduce her to me?" It was not until then that Chao Yufeng remembered that he had not introduced Luo Xiu to Qin Sheng. He did not know whether to laugh or cry as he said, "Let me formally introduce her to you. Luo Xiu, my girlfriend or fiancée. We got engaged before the Spring Festival. Xiu, this handsome guy, who was extremely brave just now, I guess you already know him. He is my college roommate, Qin Sheng." Qin Sheng took the initiative to formally greet Luo Xiu and said with a smile, "Lao congratulations." It did not occur to me that you are the second hero in our dormitory who is going to go to the grave of marriage. You will get married sooner or later. I will not talk about Xia Ding, the playboy. But I heard from Xia Ding that you also have a girlfriend, who is so beautiful that it makes people's hair stand on end. When will you let me meet her?" When they had just been there, Chao Yufeng had felt somewhat pressured because he knew that the group of people sitting beside Qin Sheng were not ordinary people. Therefore, he had not spoken much. However, there were only the two of them now, so Chao Yufeng had returned to normal. Speaking of Lin Su, Qin Sheng sighed subconsciously. Chao Yufeng frowned and asked, "What's wrong? Did they break up?" Qin Sheng shook his head and said, "It's a long story. I will tell you later. I have not seen her for 2 or 3 months. Compared with your life, it is really not easy for me to get to where I am now." At this time, the waiter brought the wine over. Luo Xiu poured it for them naturally. Chao Yufeng picked up the wine glass and said, "It is the Spring Festival. Let's not talk about those sad things. I don't want to ask you about your past. It is enough for me to see you today. Let's drink." This was the Chao Yufeng he knew. Qin Sheng picked up the wine glass and drank it up. He said, "It has been 1.5 years since we parted in Shanghai. Time flies. I did not expect to see you here today." "Alas, big brother, to be honest, don't laugh at me. In fact, based on my level, I am not qualified to attend such a party at all. However, Xiu wanted to come and said that she would introduce me to some friends. So I followed her. It did not occur to me that I would meet Du Xian here. However, after thinking about it, it is normal for others to come here, but it is not normal for me to come here. He and I are in the same unit. We do not like each other at all. Since we have different goals, we cannot make plans together. Usually, we do not have any contact with each other. Alas, who knows that more contradictions and hatred have arisen because of a woman. I was implicated. He likes that woman, and that woman likes me. She has been chasing after me for 2 days. So, you know." Chao Yufeng briefly explained what had happened today to Qin Sheng. He also wanted to let Qin Sheng know that it was not him who took the initiative to make trouble, but others. Qin Sheng nodded with a smile and said, "I know your character. During the 4 years in college, when did you make trouble? However, you are so lucky with women. Aren't you afraid that Xiu will make you kneel on the washboard later?" Chao Yufeng said with a smile, "It's okay. She won't. Xiu knows this better than anyone else." Qin Sheng laughed out loud as he said, "Ha ha ha. It seems that you have found yourself a good wife." Though there had been an unpleasant episode just now, he was in a good mood since he could see his second brother again. Chow Yufeng picked up his wine glass and clinked glasses with Qin Shing again. After that, the smile on his face faded away gradually. He said quite seriously, "Big brother, no matter what, I have to thank you today. If it were not for you, I would have lost my face. So, Xiao and I propose a toast to you." Qin Shing picked up his wine glass and smiled bitterly as he said, "Do we need to say these words to each other? Don't talk nonsense. Let's drink." After drinking a glass of wine, Chow Yufeng said somewhat self-mockingly, "Alas, big brother, don't look down on me. When we were in college, we were unscrupulous and didn't care about fighting and making trouble. However, now that we have stepped into society, there are too many things we can't do. Du Xian punched me today. I can't afford to offend him. I can only endure it and admit that I am a coward. I don't want to endure it either. Who would like to be a grandson? But sometimes you have to be a grandson because you don't have the strength to be a boss. I have no choice. After all, he was born in a good family and his uncle is the leader of our ministry." Qin Shing was slightly stunned. He realized that his words at the beginning, "Second brother, when did you become such a coward? You didn't even dare to fight back when you were beaten." He had hurt his second brother. He said in a hurry, "Second brother, I didn't mean to say that. Don't take it to heart." Chow Yufeng smiled bitterly as he said, "Big brother, I don't blame you. I just feel a little emotional. I think it is not only me who feels this way. Lao San and Lao Si probably have more helplessness." Qin Shing filled up the wine glass and said, "Let's not talk about this today. After the Spring Festival, I will trick Lao San and Lao Si into going to Beijing. At that time, we will talk about it and get drunk." Chow Yufeng, who also felt that it was too sad, said in a hurry, "Okay. Let's not talk about this. Let's drink." They did not drink for a long time. After all, it was the Spring Festival. Everyone had something to do tomorrow. However, they drank happily. Qin Shing and Chow Yufeng did not talk too much nonsense. Chow Yufeng did not ask Qin Shing anything about his past, nor did Qin Shing ask about his work. That was because these things were not important to them. At this moment, it was enough for the two brothers to see each other and drink. Qin Ran sent a message to Qin Shing on the way to ask him where he was. Qin Shing told her that he was at the Tong Lu restaurant on Gui Street. Consequently, Qin Ran asked Uncle Gongsun to arrange a car to wait for Qin Shing outside the Tong Lu restaurant until Qin Shing, Chow Yufeng, and Xiao separated. On the way back to the Sihiyuan of the Qin family, Qin Shing felt a little emotional, especially when Chow Yufeng said, "I can only endure it and admit that I am a coward." He felt very sad. However, he had no choice. This was life. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.